And as we look to the skies, may we also learn to look within. Aloha, multi-dimensional, intergalactic friends, shifters, light guardians from all across this dimension and beyond. Thank you so much for joining in. My name is Mystic Spider-Man, Brendon, Wolf Shield, Skull Babylon. You are tuned in for another exciting, inspirational, educational live podcast presented here on behalf of Paradigm Shift Central, a portal for inspirational leaders and creators. And this is a very special broadcast that we have here tonight. Of course, the theme is all about UFOs and the shift in consciousness. So this one's going to be exciting. So thank you everyone so much for joining in. We're going to get right into the discussion in the next moment. Of course, I am joined here once again by some fellow amazing shifters. So fellow amazing shifters, go ahead. You guys should be able to unmute yourself and gently let's make some alien noises and send some love to all the people who are tuned in right now. So go ahead, everyone, gently unmute their microphones and be like, awesome. That's perfect. I'm glad we didn't plan that. That's exactly how I imagined it though. So wonderful. Thank you again, everyone, so much for joining. Off the start, I apologize if there's a little bit of a audio sync between the video and the audio. Please forgive us. That will be kind of resolved as we go out through the broadcast. But again, if you can hear us loud and clear in the chat, drop an 1111 and let us know. And again, thank you so much for being here. If it's your first time here, if you've been here before, we got something really special taking place here within this community and within the discussions that we are having. And this is a big discussion. This is a very, very important discussion. So before we get into that, of course, encourage you to make sure that you're connected to the social media links down below. You can also make sure that you're connected to the fellow people that you'll see on the broadcast by checking the show notes after the broadcast and even by connecting to them in the YouTube chat as well. For those of you on TikTok and Instagram right now, click the link in my profile to jump over to YouTube. For those of you on Facebook, you can jump over to YouTube as well. And again, huge shout out to our Patreon supporters for helping make this broadcast possible. If you really dig the content that we're putting out and you even want to be able to connect further with the community, be sure to check out our Patreon where you can support with a monthly contribution and also join as a leading member where you can even join on future on-air podcast discussions that we do here, plus other aspects within our private community space for conscious creators. So super excited to be able to have this discussion. So let's kind of like set the bigger picture as we dive into this for who knows, like we're going to set, I'm going to kind of set a time frame where I'll say this discussion will probably go for about like 3-ish hours, give or take. But nonetheless, there is an infinity when it comes to this topic. And let me just kind of take a moment here to just allow ourselves to, first of all, drop into a little bit of just kind of a meditative gratitude state. So with our previous broadcast and this one being no exception, this is going to be another free flow discussion. So this is going to be obviously related to the topic of UFOs and the shift in consciousness. But at the end of the day, this is still practice. This is an opportunity for us to be able to have conversations about the things that we don't normally get a chance to talk about, for us to practice being sacred mirrors, for us to be able to see more within ourselves and the universe beyond. So in this moment, before we dive into the discussion, because I know a part of me is just like, get into it, let's just go, UFOs, oh crazy, it's such an exciting topic. But I think we'll be doing ourselves a favor if we can just take a moment here to just be able to take a brief moment to meditate and connect with our breath and synchronize and drop into this heart space, and then we'll talk a little bit more about what the intentions of this broadcast are. So just inviting everybody here, for those of you tuned in and even listening to this in the future, just inviting you to join us. And as you listen to my voice, just go ahead and gently close your eyes. And as you close your eyes here, just bringing awareness to your breath. And just allowing yourself to be in this space of gratitude. Gratitude to be amongst others who are adamantly seeking, who are curious, who are working on themselves, who are here to help assist with the shift in consciousness. And so in this moment, I want you to just kind of visualize all of us just like sitting in a circle together. You can imagine ourselves like sitting inside of like a yoga studio, which is the origin of how this all began, was just me doing meetings and meeting up with people and having discussion. And now here we are doing it virtually. And so just imagine as we sit in this circle, and just take a moment here to just look around the circle and just see these faces, new faces, familiar faces, friends, fellow souls, and just express your gratitude to them as you also receive gratitude being sent back in return. And so just take a moment here to breathe and I'll just stop talking just for a couple moments, and I just want you to literally just be with your breath, just be in this place of oneness, and just allow yourself to be in this space of gratitude. So go ahead, just breathe here just for one moment. Beautiful. And again, just carrying this gratitude with you throughout the rest of the broadcast, while you listen to it, while you enjoy it, while you're inspired by it. And gently bringing your awareness back to your physical body, wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, slowly open your eyes, and return your awareness to the space around you. Beautiful. Awesome. Good job, everyone. Thank you again for joining in, and yeah, let's get into this discussion. So before we do that, of course, I am joined. I'm Mystic Spider-Man. Most of you know me. But we've got Kelly Lamb, who's with us here tonight. So Kelly, you can just wave at them. We've got Kris as well. We've got Rachel, and we've also got Lise. And I know we are going to be having a couple other people who are going to be joining us a little bit later in the broadcast as well, that will definitely have some very exciting things to be able to add to this topic. For those of you who are tuned in on YouTube or anywhere right now, please feel free to let other people know about this broadcast. One way you can do that is by even like taking a screenshot of this with your mobile device and then posting it to Instagram and tagging me in Instagram and tell people to click the link in my profile. That's one way that you can invite people to be able to tune in. But of course, you can even just send people the link directly. So let's get into this. Why are we having this topic? Why is this a topic to be had now? So with all the things that are happening in the world, this topic really just came from me just kind of listening to my intuition. UFOs, the UFO phenomena, has always been a topic that has interested me. You know, I've always just kind of had this curiosity about nature and metaphysics and all of the things that are not easy to explain. And so UFOs was always a big part of that. And with where things are moving right now within the collective of the world, obviously things are happening pretty fast. And if we look at the last 6 months, there's a lot that's happened. And even a lot of people are kind of feeling into this, where it's just like, you know what? Like, something related to UFOs and aliens doesn't even seem that far-fetched at this point. If anything, it's almost expected and therefore should be anticipated. So therefore, a big reason for us being able to have this conversation as a community is what I wanted to be able to bring, to invite us into this space, to be able to have the opportunity to develop mindsets and just ideas, and start kind of like beginning to see some of the bigger picture relative to possible futures that may be on the horizon, in which the topic of UFOs could start becoming more mainstream than they even are. And also because this topic in itself is one that is so incredibly interconnected with our shift in consciousness. You cannot talk about the UFO phenomena without it eventually leading you into this deeper understanding of consciousness as a whole, and unity consciousness and dimensions, and being able to think for ourselves, and sovereignty, and understanding the different narratives and agendas that the government's got going on, and what the actual truth may be behind things, and most importantly, our role within it. Because believe it or not, we have a very important role to play within the ongoing story, within the ongoing collective narrative relative to the UFO phenomenon. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just kind of like share some basic ideas, and then we're going to start passing the talking stick around for a little bit, and we'll just kind of let the conversation and the fractal unfold there. And for those of you in the chat, please feel free to add your voice. Let us know, have you seen a UFO? Are you interested in UFOs? Feel free to leave those comments down in the chat, and we'll leave those on air together. So just a quick little, what I want to just be able to start off with, speaking of UFO experiences, I have had my own UFO experience, one that was definitely a UFO experience. And even last night, I may have seen a UFO last night. And so part of leading into this discussion that we are having tonight, a lot of the ideas that I'm actually going to be mentioning have been very inspired by a recent documentary that I watched that some of you have probably already seen, and I would encourage others to go check it out even after this broadcast. And that documentary is called CE5. So if you type in CE5, the letter C, the letter E, 5, and that stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And this is a project that is made by a guy named Stephen Greer. So Stephen Greer, he's been researching the UFO phenomena for quite some time. He's had his own UFO experiences growing up, back when he was just a teenager in the 70s. So like before, he was just a free thinker, but and he talks about this in the documentary and everything like that. And a lot of what he talks about in the documentary is going to kind of be echoed here. Obviously, like it's important to just kind of like, even with the documentary, yeah, well, think for ourselves. Everything's information. But even before I go any further, I just want to be able to mention that with the discussion that we're going to have tonight, a little bit of like a viewer discretion is advised. Like this topic, this discussion that we have tonight may shift your paradigm. It may challenge you to be able to think about the way you think of the world. And so if you feel like, maybe you've got enough things on your plate and maybe you're just not ready to kind of put your focus there, then allow this to just be able to be an invitation that you can just kind of like put off to the side and come back to later. You don't have to watch this broadcast now, but for those who kind of feel called, again, just be aware that some of the things that we're talking about may kind of like challenge your understanding of reality, but in a way that can also be very expansive too. So one of the things that Stephen Greer talks about in the documentary, and I'll start with this, is this idea that collectively right now we have to be aware that there are multiple narratives that are taking place relative to the UFO agenda. There are multiple narratives taking place relative to the UFO phenomena. One of those narratives is a particular agenda that is being played out by like government, by like the military and things like that. And the way how I can just explain this very simply is basically this idea that the government wants to be able to create this narrative where they are portraying UFOs as being a threat. And there's multiple layers as to why they are doing this. And we'll explain this throughout the broadcast, because by the time you're done this, I want you to really be able to kind of like see things in a way where it's like, I get it. I see the bigger picture. And that's what I've been working on. I've really been working on trying to do my best to be able to understand this, so that I can do my best to share this understanding, so that I can help others understand it as well. And I feel like I got a pretty good understanding of things. Obviously, that doesn't mean I understand everything, but I got a pretty good idea of kind of like foresight on being able to understand where things are going. So one of the first things to be able to understand about UFOs, and I'll just kind of like mention this real quick, we need to be able to understand that a lot of the phenomena related to UFOs, instead of just thinking of the idea that UFOs are coming from another planet, like they're literally, like a little green Martian flying from another planet and coming here to Earth, we need to start thinking more so about the understanding that UFOs are more so coming from another dimension. They're not necessarily just coming from another planet. They're literally coming from another dimension, or they're coming through dimensional space. And what exactly does that mean? We'll talk a little bit about that as we go. But basically, part of the idea behind this, and this is a lot what's explained within the CE5 documentary, is that UFOs are real. They have been here for quite some time, and they are, again, kind of like, they are evidence of the fact that there is something more than us. There is an advanced civilization or advanced civilizations, and they have an interest in us, and they have been observing us in some form or another. And every now and then they arrive into our reality, and they usually, and you'll see this within like the CE5 documentary, and we might be able to show some clips later tonight. I'm not exactly sure if I'll get it queued up properly, but you'll see this. And this is a lot of the experience within the UFO phenomena, where a lot of these UFOs, they'll be like lights in the sky, and they'll kind of like phase in and phase out. And it's not like they're literally just turning their light on and off. It's literally, they're kind of like coming out of a dimension and moving into our dimension, sort of thing. And some of them aren't even always like fully physically in our dimension. It's kind of like they're half in their dimension and half in our dimension, sort of thing. And this is where you can start getting kind of like the weird anomalies and stuff like that. Now, based on a lot of the experiences that have taken place over the years and everything like that, one of the things that's incredibly interesting, and again, I'm just going to do my best here and I'm going to pass it over. I just want to be able to like paint the picture, because this is why we're having the conversation here. It's not just like, oh, let's just talk about UFOs randomly. It's like, no, let's talk about UFOs so that we can kind of like see the bigger picture of what's happening and be able to see our place within the story. So, and thank you for allowing me to practice, because yeah, I'm just going to do my best to be able to explain this, and hopefully I can do this in like 5 minutes. So just give me 2 seconds here. What's been happening within the UFO narrative is basically this idea that UFOs are part of this idea of an advanced civilization that in itself is not as alien as we think it is, in the sense that this consciousness behind these UFO sightings is still us. It is literally us. And a lot, this is more so an idea. So anything I'm saying here, please don't just take it as fact. If it resonates with you, that's cool. But again, just use discernment and everything like that. One of the ideas that we can understand is that these UFOs are coming from like a civilization that is also consciously evolved and spiritually evolved. I'm not saying every single UFO is, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. But one of the things that's interesting is that they actually have an interest in wanting to be able to help with our evolution of consciousness. That is actually part of the reason why they are here. They're actually here to be able to help assist us in awakening our consciousness. So one of the things that's incredibly amazing about the UFO phenomenon, this is what the CE5 documentary talks about. The CE5 stands for Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. So Close Encounters of the first kind would be a sighting. Close Encounters of the second kind would be some sort of physical residue, like a crop circle, or, you know, like damage on trees or something like that. Close Encounters of the third kind would be like some sort of like interaction with like an actual being. Close Encounters of the fourth kind would be a person going on board one of the crafts. Close Encounters of the fifth kind is human-initiated contact. And so what is actually happening is basically this idea that humans are understanding that what we can do is actually meditate, bring ourselves into a heart-mind resonance, and then basically project our consciousness, not even project, but just kind of like attune our consciousness, and then to be able to like basically let the UFOs know that we're like communicating, and then to be able to invite the UFOs to be able to show themselves to us. And this is happening, and this has been happening, and this is a big part of what Stephen Greer talks about in the CE5 documentary, and this is something that he was doing even when he was a teenager. Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people are doing this worldwide right now. This is a big part of the phenomena. And so basically what's happening is this idea of like, humans are being invited to be able to connect more with a deeper understanding of who they are, to be able to bring themselves into this pure-hearted space. And in the process of doing that, they are also being given the opportunity to be able to establish direct relationships with these more advanced civilizations. And in this process, people are literally meditating, sending out a signal, and then UFOs are appearing. So the objective that we are creating here is to be able to explore the question of what does it mean to develop a relationship with these civilizations. And I'm kind of using the term civilization very broadly, so to speak. And so this is where I'm going to tie it back into kind of like the government thing and what the agenda is, and to be able to understand where things are going. And then I'm going to pass the talking stick. So the phenomena of UFOs is incredibly important, because in understanding what it is and understanding that the UFOs are like literally us, like the inhabitants, and again, some UFOs can more just be thought of as like probes and drones, but some of the different ships are literally like, again, they have occupants in them, they have people in them, and those people might not just be like gray aliens. They could be very much just like us. And also some of the ships are also conscious in themselves. The ships are like literally like conscious ships, which is a phenomenal thing to think about. But basically what is happening is that humans, regardless of the government agenda, are beginning to develop this relationship. And as we develop this relationship with UFO phenomena and everything like that, it is basically returning us back to our power as sovereign beings with a deeper understanding of like multidimensional reality. And therefore, this This is why the government wants to be able to create this agenda that UFOs are a threat. The UFOs themselves are not actually the threat. Not from the perspective of the government, the real threat is us. Is us and our sovereignty, because as we continue to awaken, then that jeopardizes the dominion and the power that they have over the people and that they have with the narrative that they're creating. So like this is when you can start to really understand what's actually happening here, is that the government and the UFO, they are kind of in this effort where they're like holding on, but they can tell that like they're losing their grip. They can tell that people are starting to wake up on their own terms, and it's beyond their control. And that's why what is actually part of the reason why I'm having this discussion is because within my intuition and just kind of within logic and observing patterns, I don't think it's too far-fetched to predict and assume that within the near future, we're going to start seeing even more media related to this narrative that UFOs are a threat, and therefore give the government more power, give the government more dominion, trust the government, we'll take care of you. And if you look at this whole idea, this agenda has been going all the way back, you know, like even going back like shortly after the world wars and everything like that, because that's when they started to become aware of the phenomena. Like that is like when the government really started getting interested in this, because they're just like, yo, we don't have control of these things. And this is like not cool for us, because we're like the government and the military, it's very much kind of like this like male kind of like dominance, like very egoic. It's like, oh, we have to have power. And therefore, when there's something that shows up on the scene that they don't have power over, they get freaked out about it. Not just because they don't understand what it is, but because the concept of it, once you kind of get to the layers of understanding that these UFOs, they're not just like little green alien men and everything like that, but it's actually more about like the awakening of consciousness. And so if people were to understand the true story of the UFO phenomena, it will awaken our consciousness. And that is why this narrative is being propagated. So what I'm actually anticipating, and we're already seeing this, is more of this narrative of the UFO agenda being a threat. And therefore, what we're actually going to see, and this is where it gets interesting, where like a lot of the stuff that's happening right now, we're observing this idea of like, you know, like racial division, us and the other and everything like that. It's happening with BLM and everything like that. We're actually going to see it in a similar level related to us and aliens. Like it's like, and I'm not trying to like make light of anything, but just keep that in mind, that could actually happen in the future, where there's going to be some sort of division where some people are going to be like, screw aliens, they're the threat, like stupid aliens are stupid, they just, because that's the narrative that we've created with it. And again, you look at like the programming that's been taking place within Hollywood movies, right? The majority of Hollywood movies are about this idea that aliens are a threat and they're the enemy of mankind and they're out to get us. And they don't, I mean, there are other movies that do actually have like a lot of like very benevolent themes related to aliens, but the majority of it is this idea that aliens are a threat. And so it's going to be up to us to be able to create a parallel narrative that is within our own power, that is something that is going to be able to like bring us back to this higher degree of spiritual awareness. And that's the thing, the understanding of the UFO phenomena is actually just one wave in a bigger process of pulling back the veil. Like once the idea of the UFO starts to get understood more within the community, and we can actually start having these experiences where we're meditating and they're starting to show up, and we're starting to like kind of develop this relationship. And again, this relationship is not just happening just as lights in the sky. This relationship is also happening within our dreams. You know, it's happening in meditation, it's happening in dream space. And that's this idea, is that like we have to start thinking about the UFO phenomena and other entities and other things like that as being more multidimensional. Like the concept of the UFO phenomena doesn't even require this idea of thinking that like things are flying through space and stuff like that. But again, as the UFO phenomena starts to get revealed, it will also bring into question deeper levels of the pulling back of the veil, of starting to really question like, what is this reality? What is this reality? Like really on a deep level, on a deep metaphysical level. And this is where it starts to get into some really shifty stuff. And I want to just be able to like kind of like, without even saying everything that's on my mind, because I think there's kind of steps to this, I would encourage people to just kind of like get into this place to be able to kind of like understand that everything that they think they know could like be prepared to let go of the idea that everything that you think you know is what it is, sort of thing, because it might not be. And I'm not going to say what it is or it isn't, but just be aware of that a lot of the stories, a lot of the narratives related to UFOs and things related to that, there could be something more to it. And the something more to it is not actually scary. It's actually so freaking magical. It's even more magical than the narrative that we've been told. And again, the magic of this narrative actually brings it back to this understanding that we are multidimensional beings, that we are these beings and like connected to the cosmos and stuff like that. So I'm just going to wrap it up here. But again, what I'm foreseeing is this possibility, and literally, I'll say it now just in case it happens. I'm literally imagining this narrative of like, you know, artificial, like, well, I don't know, it could be real UFOs, but it could be fake UFOs, but either way, it doesn't matter. But I'm imagining this image, and you could, like, I don't know, like, you could picture this with me too, of like 3 triangle lights floating above the White House with, and just sitting there in enough time where like people on the news actually get to film this, and then it starts showing up on the news, but then the lights disappear, and then it's just kind of ambiguous, and there's no clear answer, and then from there it's going to be a lot of speculation, and then people are going to start kind of like, and then that's what you're going to see. You're going to start seeing some people use that to start spinning fear. And with that fear, they're going to try and gain control. And so this is my like intuition, just kind of like saying, and this isn't me being like a tinfoil hatter. I'm just like, that doesn't seem that far-fetched. So we have to kind of anticipate that type of reality could be on the horizon, where something's going to happen within the mainstream that's going to put UFOs like in the mainstream. And then within that, we have to be aware of how the narratives are being spun, and be aware of how they're being spun towards this idea that they're being a threat. Because this is why the UFO documents have been declassified, because they know that the information's out there. Even going back to like Stephen Greer's first documentary, Unacknowledged, they know the public is becoming aware. So rather than just saying UFOs don't exist, instead they are admitting that they do exist, but they're also spinning it with this narrative that they might be a threat. So what will we do once the UFOs show up over the White House and it shows up on the news and other people start talking about it? How will we as individuals and conscious community help anchor ourselves into a grounded, heart-centered place to be able to construct this narrative of understanding that like we actually have this incredible opportunity to literally, like right now, we can start putting our focus on developing a relationship with these advanced civilizations right here and now. And I know that sounds like something crazy out of a sci-fi movie, but this is the last thing I'll mention here. And drop an 1111 if this is kind of like giving you a bit an understanding of the overview of why this conversation is important. The other reason why this UFO phenomenon is important relative to the shift in consciousness, and I'll put this quite simply, is because direct experiences that people have with the UFO phenomena has the power to open their hearts and to awaken their consciousness and to transform their lives and to empower them in a very, very powerful way. And so this is why, like imagine like, you know, just like regular people start understanding that the UFO phenomenon is here and that there is a benevolence to it. And there's actually a bigger story that we'll start getting into. But this is the thing that happens when you get some people who just like didn't even really know if they believed in UFOs, and then they finally see one and it awakens their consciousness. It literally awakens their consciousness. They're just like, holy crap, there's more to this reality. Something sparks in them, and even it's the feeling that stays with them. And if you look at it, this is why I think the UFO phenomena has been taking place over these past many, many years. It's literally been taking place. Like the occupants of these UFOs or the drones, they've literally, like, their agenda is to help awaken consciousness. And so that's why, like, they'll literally show up and they'll reveal themselves to certain people at certain time when they're ready to be able to see it. And every single person that sees it, it like plants a seed and it does something. It sparks something within them. So you have to understand that like we're here on Earth right now, and then like in these other dimensions, and and when I say dimensions, it's like, it's not like it's like a dimension where it's like hard, like it's like nebulous and hard to imagine. Like that dimension could literally just be like imagine Earth is like a bubble. Imagine Earth is like a marble, and Earth is one dimension. And now imagine they have another bubble, and that's their dimension, but their dimension also has like a 3D density to it as well. And they're literally just like traveling from their bubble to our bubble. And it's not through space, it's literally through like quantum stuff. It's quantum entanglement sort of thing. And so like kind of like when you kind of like understand that, it just kind of like helps paint the picture of things. And the other thing is, and this is where it starts to get interesting, is that from where they are to where they're able to kind of like interface with us, time is different to them. Like they can almost, this is more so a theory, they can actually kind of like jump into our reality and almost like pick the time that they want to show up. So they could literally like imagine you're the person in that other bubble right now, and imagine it's like you and your dad, and you've got like a UFO or something. Like, I don't know, this is where it gets weird and it's hard for us to comprehend. Like, are UFOs literally just like cars in their dimension, and there's like different models and makes and stuff like that, and people buy and sell them or something? I don't know, kind of, maybe, but this would explain the variety of the different UFOs and styles and shapes and everything like that. But imagine you're like get in your vehicle and be like, okay, let's like go like check out Egypt, and then you just go back to Egypt at that time. And that's where you start getting this idea that like some of the UFOs, it's almost like they're like tourists. And this is where you start getting into those weird ideas of like, whoa, like are we like is Earth like a zoo? Like are we like, you know, like are they just like kind of like looking at us or something? And that's not to make it like kind of like really creepy or something like that. But again, it's just kind of more so painting the picture of what they're capable, and from this other dimension they can literally arrive at different space and time. And so this is why when you're meditating, you can literally send out this signal. And the signal, and that's the thing, this is more so my idea. Don't focus so much on this idea of them being out there. Like, I think we need to change that. I think we've created this narrative where we have this idea of like constantly looking out, and if you look at it, this narrative has actually been kind of depressing, because it's like we look out and we're not finding anything. It's like, oh, we're alone, and this has been a narrative that's kind of been propagated by you know, some forms of media and everything like that. But instead of looking out, understand that we're actually looking in. And that's where you connect with them. That's where you connect with them. When you're meditating, it's not like you're projecting your signal like all the way across the galaxy. You're projecting it inwards. And it's within this process of projecting it inwards that you're kind of connecting to them. And we'll explain more about the protocol, but it's basically like, and Stephen Greer talks about this, where you kind of like give them directions. It's like you kind of like zoom in on yourself almost as if it's Google Map, and you're like, okay, I'm here. I am benevolence. I'm in my heart space. I am of pure heart. I'm here to develop relationship with like higher, you know, dimensional civilizations. If you choose to, please feel free to show yourself to me. And they do. They freaking do. And like, this is the thing. This is the thing that's actually being experienced. And literally, and I said this last night, like, I'll just say this, and again, I know I'm talking, but again, I just hope what I'm talking just helps create the context for all the other stuff that comes out of this. Because I'm saying this not just because I'm trying to babble on, but because I'm trying to like get us into a common understanding. Because this understanding, it's taken me a while to just kind of formulate this, but I can feel it so clearly now. And one of the sightings that I saw when I was younger, I mentioned this in a TikTok video. It was like a triangle light. And it was like a three lights that kind of appeared, and then it kind of appeared over top me and phased out. For a while, literally up until a few days ago, I was under the more so the impression that was most likely government. Now I'm starting to think that it might not have been. That it might have actually been more so kind of like it wasn't decloaking. It was actually like phasing into a dimension. And if that's the case, then what I actually saw could have been like from these like higher civilizations. But at the same time, this is a part of the narrative to understand. There are man-made UFOs. Like, government has literally shot down UFOs intentionally. Like, imagine you're just like flying through Earth, like, again, kind of like a tourist, and then suddenly the government's like chasing you and shooting you down. Like, yo, that would suck. But they're shooting down UFOs, and then they're taking the technology and the reverse engineering the technology. This has been happening. This is like secret programs and stuff like that. This has been happening for years. And then so like some of the UFOs that we're seeing are man-made, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them, again, like they exist in different forms. Some of them are just like pure light. They're like pure consciousness. But some of them have different shapes and different forms and everything like that. So I think what I saw, even though for a while I'm like, yeah, I think that was just one of the government triangle ships, I'm starting to think that it might not have been. And then what happened last night, literally after watching the CE5 documentary, where it was literally just like, yeah, you know, like, go out, meditate on the night sky, bring yourself to a pure heart, pure intention, send out the signal, and be there and like sit for 30 minutes and meditate, kind of like calibrate and see what happens. And last night I was doing this and I saw something, to my surprise. And it was literally only for 5 seconds. I was kind of sitting there, but I 100% saw a white dot move like perpendicular, and then it disappeared. And satellites don't do that. Satellites don't just disappear. And I checked and there was no clouds. And so even in that moment, I was just kind of like, huh. Like I wasn't like, oh my God, that was it. Because it was almost just like, it was so subtle that it was just like, was that it? And then a part of me is just like, can I get a little more? Like, can you just like, you know, just do a little flyby real quick or something like that. But even in that moment, I'm like, maybe that was something. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was just debris in the atmosphere or something like that. I don't know for sure. And that's part of the reason why I'm not like getting overly excited about it. But something happened. Something happened literally just within me practicing that last night. And fortunately, like with my new apartment, I literally live like on a balcony and I can look out and see the sky. And now I'm just feeling this call where I'm like, okay, what is going to be important to me is now we are at the point where it's not just about the podcasts. It's not just about the videos. It's not just about the documentaries. We are at the point right now where we have the opportunity to begin inviting in direct experience. We have the opportunity where we can actually, anybody here could practice this. And again, the main thing though is like being in that vibration of like love. Like that's actually it. Like that's actually the trick. So this is where like even within the morning meditations that we've been doing, whether we've known it or not, every person that's been taking part of these meditations and every person that's been doing their own practice, we've actually been preparing ourselves for this. By getting good at dropping into that meditative state, dropping into that heart-mind coherence, we've actually been getting ourselves prepared to be able to be in a place where we can actually make like telepathic contact with these higher, ultra advanced technology civilizations and to be able to invite them into our experience. And again, we have to understand that like these civilizations, like they are literally like billions of years old, billions of years older. And once you really start to understand a little bit more about what they are, it starts to tie in with other things. And for those of you who start kind of like, who have kind of like dabbled in the whole idea of like simulation theory and stuff like that, I'll just kind of like sprinkle that there because it's not unrelated. And even the whole concept of dreams and psychedelics and everything like that, they all tie in. They all tie in. And so again, even if we don't know exactly what the bigger story is, I can promise you that the bigger story is incredibly beautiful. It's incredibly magical. It's incredibly empowering. And that is why I'm having this discussion, to be able to invite us to be able to start connecting the dots, to start seeing the bigger picture, and for us to see our power. Because again, that is what the government is afraid of. They're not actually afraid of, they are less afraid of the UFOs than they are of losing their power and losing their dominion over people because people are waking up. And they lose their power when we stop unconsciously giving them our power. That's the trick. And once we become conscious of that, we'll be aware of that. And then that's when things will start to shift. And they've been holding on to this power for so long, but they're a part of the bigger story too. But yeah, now is the time where it's like, it is a revolution, and the UFO phenomena and the occupants and the beings and the consciousness, they are on our side. Like this is the next wave of the revolution. It is like this like interdimensional revolution, and it's consciousness, it's inside. So that's why I'm having this conversation. I know that took me a while to explain. Please drop an 1111 if you're just like, yo, like this resonates and what I said makes sense. Please let me know if anything like doesn't make sense or anything like that. But again, it's taken me a while to kind of like really bring myself to a place where I'm like, whoa, like I can understand it, I can see it, and I can see where this is going. And that's where, again, we're having this conversation because I want us to almost run the simulation in our head of what happens in 3 weeks from now when UFOs start showing up on the news. What role are we going to play within that story? And how are we going to help create this new narrative that is anchored around benevolence and love? and to be able to see the brotherly connection, the kin between ourselves and these beings, because they are us. They are literally us, so to speak. So awesome. All right, I'm glad what I shared with you like slightly shifted your paradigms, because again, the more people that we can kind of have within this understanding, the more we can kind of prepare ourselves for the future, the more we can kind of anchor in these energies, the more we can show up for our friends. And again, like we're at the point where, like I said, this isn't just talk anymore. Like this is action. Like we're at the point where like everything that we've been doing up to this point is like calling us into action. And so let us continue that. What will it look like as we continue to develop that relationship with these higher conscious dimensional civilizations, whatever we're calling them? So awesome. All right. Okay. I'm going to pass the talking stick around. Thank you again. I know that was like literally me talking for like 40 minutes or something like that. But I'm glad I was able to share that. And again, I encourage everyone to watch the CE5 documentary. It kind of goes into what I said there, but it gives you just more things, and it shows you lots of videos and images and pictures. The amount of UFO sightings that are online and everywhere, they're so common, and they're going to start becoming common. And yeah, who knows? Maybe some of us will start seeing them ourselves soon enough. So, all right, okay, I'm gonna pass the talking stick. Give me a hands up for whoever wants to be able to jump in with something that they want to be able to add into the discussion. And thank you guys so much for your patience as well. And looks like Neil's joining right now. And I wish Neil was able to have heard what I just said all of before, but nonetheless. Did you hear what I was just talking about, Neil?
I heard everything, bro. I was on.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. All right. Well, if you guys are cool, I wouldn't mind passing it to Neil, because I know he has to jump out at some point. But are you guys okay with that? Yeah. Okay. Because Neil actually like is of all the amazing people that we get to have in the community and on the discussion, I'm super blessed to be able to have Neil here. One of the reasons is because what we're talking about is actually like something that Neil is already familiar with. He has actually worked with Dr. Stephen Greer. He's helped him with past events. He's been to CE5 events as well. And so yeah, Neil, I'll pass it over to you, and maybe even just let me know if things I were explaining, if you felt need some clarification or some more details, or what do we need to know about? What do you feel we're kind of moving into? So Neil, pass it over to you, dude. Go right ahead, man. And thank you so much for joining.
For sure, bro. Thank you, man. Yeah, everything you're saying was really on point, and it's truly about making this information practical and having people understand that this is a real phenomena, and taking it out of just the spiritual community. For a long time, some people used to ask me, what does meditation and spirituality have to do with UFOs and extraterrestrials? And unless you're really in this community and have gone on this journey and then connected with interdimensional beings, or know about the concept of it all and be introduced to it, you don't realize how hand in hand this is all connected. It's really a consciousness game, but more than that, it's actually a vibratory state of being. The reason why we aren't able to connect and communicate on a one-on-one level all the time with ETs is because our frequencies are not the same. They're shifting in different frequencies. There are some people that say that there are UFOs all around us. Like Earth is the largest light show in the universe right now, and that many species have donated their DNA to our planet in order to see how their DNA evolves and interacts with other types of beings. And therefore, there are beings everywhere, interdimensional beings, people out of beings that are shifted out of reality, observing us, perceiving us, experimenting on us, um, observing the way we evolve and how we're connected to their race. So we are the largest light show in the universe right now, and there are many planets. From speaking to Dr. Greer and other people, there are a lot of planets, and Bashar talks about this as well. But there's only one or two races, actually, just a couple of races, especially ones that exist in higher dimensions of existence, where we aren't such physical beings in this third dimensional reality. And when they exist in those realities, they only interact with a few different races. But if you look at Earth and our experience here, what do you see? Like we can't even really count how many species we have. Just by burning an area of the rainforest, you kill like hundreds or countless numbers of species. There are so many extraterrestrials, interdimensionals, ultra terrestrials, all types of beings that have donated their genetic code to this planet in order for us to evolve and flourish. And the paradox is, from my understanding, is that we are actually their ancestors. that not only have these beings come back, technically in our reality is time traveling, but for them it's just a frequency shift. Not only have they come back in order to see this planet, but we are actually going to become them in the future. There are people like Lisa Royale, who wrote this book called The Prism of Lyra, which I highly recommend. 120-page book. It's online, channeled book, and it talks about our galactic origins. And in this book, she talks about how there were basically there was one star system that was inhabited by humans, and it was the Lyran constellation towards the center of our galaxy that existed in very high dimension. And over millennia and millennia, this species kept fragmenting and fragmenting and fragmenting until they basically inhabited the whole entire galaxy. They became the Arcturians, the Syrians, the reptilians, the gray aliens that we know, on all types of planets and all types of dimensions, until ultimately they came to Earth and seeded Earth with a few other races. But what they actually did was is seed their ancestors, that in our future, millions of years from now, we actually evolve, go out into space, and then we become the ones that seeded us. So the whole galactic picture is so much deeper than most may realize. And right now is just an opportunity. Just over the last 4 or 5 years, really, government, the Pentagon, the Navy, the Air Force have all been validating things that we knew for quite some time. And just like around 3 years ago, I was I think it was 4 years ago when Tom DeLonge came out with his Twitter live stream, um, with a few members that used to be part of the CIA, the NSA, NASA, and they basically disclosed that this whole phenomena is real. And that was a huge validation for people, that they started realizing that, um, we've been saying this and kind of it's been in the conspiracy community for so long, but now it's actually being validated that this is a reality. But then the question is, what is the agenda behind this? If you look at if you look at a lot of people coming from the military industrial complex and what they're saying to us, you can really hear that most of what they're talking about when it comes to ETs is the craft that they're in, what kind of technology they're using, and what we can do with this technology once we harness it. But the real question is, who are these beings? Who are behind these craft, and why are they here in the first place? And what is their intention, and what is the agenda? Maybe there's thousands of agendas. Maybe there's thousands of beings that are visiting us. These are the questions that I think we're going to be addressing very soon. Right now, the ones that have an agenda and control, if you want to call it drip disclosure, and drip disclosure is, you know, coming up with disclosure in your own way with your own narrative in order to release pieces of information that you want the public to know, so that you can control the way the information comes out, because when it does come out, you want to be able to have control of the world after that. And there's been a lot of lies, a lot of manipulation, a lot of cover up that is now being disclosed. You can go to the CIA's website, you can type in UFO on the CIA's own search engine, and you'll go to the archives of many different things that are related to UFOs. You can even type in the word interdimensional on CIA's website, and there'll be at least 3 projects where you'll come up with some sort of experimentation with interdimensional beings. You can type in FBI and UFO documents on Google, and the first thing you'll see is the FBI's own website subpage dedicated to all the declassified UFO documents. And if you take any time to read this stuff, your mind will be blown, right? Like one of the projects, for example, the CIA project, um, the CIA project in which they were actually remote viewing. The CIA had hired a remote viewer to remote view Mars. And for those who don't know what remote viewing is, it's basically transferring your consciousness to another reality or another place in time or actual physical place within your own reality and perceiving how it is. So, and what is around there. So this remote viewer was actually paid by the CIA to remote view Mars 2 million years ago. And it's a script, a back and forth script between this individual and the CIA agent, going back and forth, remote viewing, and the remote viewer actually coming up with all this information that they were writing down that he was finding. And he was talking about pyramids, skeletons of giants, and different beings that existed there. So this is what they're actually dealing with. There's a reason why they're investing time and money into it. When we heard the whole thing with Tom DeLonge, which is completely agenda oriented, when he came out with his information, it was very much um, a stepping stone in the right direction because it backfired on them. They may have come out with a specific agenda, but I feel the thing that backfired is that all they did was just inform more people that this is a reality. And a simple Google search of these terms leads you to people like, Stephen Greer, Murray Rodwell, James Gilliland, many people that have been in this for a while that have been exposing this stuff. So, 6, 7 years ago, if you went up to someone and you just said, "Hey, UFOs exist," maybe they would still think you were a little like off, or like maybe like, I don't know, I don't really believe about that stuff. I guess the universe is a big place, but we don't have any evidence and proof. But now it seems like every single month there is something new that is coming out. And the reason why this is coming out, we can only speculate why they're releasing it in the way they're releasing it now, what the end game is. Some say that they're trying to use Project Bluebeam in order to um, do a fake alien invasion. Some people say that the truth is basically so huge and so hardcore right now and come out on so many levels that they need to grab hold of it and come out in their own way so that they don't get in trouble. Because what would you do when you find out that, ever since the 40s, if not even earlier in the 30s, or if not even earlier in the late 1800s, where there was a UFO crash in Texas, and there's evidence and even a gravestone of where the local people actually buried that ET, right? And this is all documented on the CIA's own website, right? When you start finding that they've known about this for so long, but they've been lying to you, and then you discover that they have technology that they reverse engineered that they've been using against you and other people in the world, are you going to be happy about it, or are you going to have some more questions? So this is the kind of situation that we all find ourselves in right now, and I'm pretty hopeful that it's going to come out. Full disclosure is a term that people use a lot in order to release all information at once. I believe in full disclosure, but I also believe that there are some people that are really won't be able to handle the gravity of the conspiracy when it comes to the UFOs and what's been happening with it. But even further than that is really the galactic origins. It's one thing to know that your government's been lying to you. We all can, 9 out of 10 people will probably say to you that governments lie, if not 10 out of 10. But it's another thing to know that these beings actually have some sort of connection to our own DNA, and maybe humankind didn't even originate on this planet, right? And this is not just based on speculation or new age woo woo information here. This is actually documented information that are coming from all types of governments. For example, the Minister of Defense in China was in Washington, D.C. at a hearing, the citizens' hearing on disclosure that I think took place around 6 years ago now, if not more, saying to ex Congress members and Senate members, because they basically paid $5,000 each to ex Congress members and ex senators in order to sit with them for a few weeks on end to hear all this information. He said that the Chinese government, Minister of Defense in China, has DNA evidence to suggest that the Chinese people come from a reptilian type species that have connections to a dragon race from our own galaxy. You can even look it up. You type in Chinese minister UFO citizens hearing, you'll see the transcript, right? Where you can look up the video on YouTube. So these officials are coming out not just to lose their credibility over nothing. It's because they are finding a lot of truths. Some people even say the only thing that opposing world powers and competing world powers such as Russia and the U.S. have got along with for decades now is the fact that they need to cover up the truth of the extraterrestrial presence. It's like the one thing that unites them all. And it's also such an important topic because it can change the way we think about religion. It can change the way we think about ourselves. It can change the fact that we have amnesia and we don't even remember our past lives and where we came from, right? So many things are involved in this that it only makes sense that it could be one of the biggest industries, communities, topics that are the most infiltrated in the entire world. Because if this came out in any way that isn't what they want to, the system that we know could collapse. Certain people could leave specific religions. If a UFO landed and we see an ET coming down here, well, other religions think of it as their prophet and their Messiah. So there is a lot happening now. All I know is that the powers that be, were, or whatever, including the Vatican and many other organizations all over the planet, are prepping for something and releasing statements in relation to extraterrestrials and the fact that they could exist because something is going to happen. I do believe that we're going to have disclosure within our own lifetimes. How it's going to happen, who's going to do it, if it's going to be from like the masses and a disclosure from the people, or if it's going to be disclosure from the government, I don't know. But I do lean towards the fact that most ETs don't really care about governments because it's not a hierarchical structure. Most interdimensional beings that are benevolent, that actually want to contribute to our consciousness, are already communicating with us. Some of them are actually visiting people through CE5. There are testimonies from a lot of people down in South America, including Chile and Peru, in which people are actually interacting with these beings on a physical level now. So I think that first contact is going to happen through communication, through consciousness, through telepathy. And then second level of conscious contact will be open contact, but it will probably be with small groups, not like, it doesn't have to be with the government. But I really don't know. Like, I'm open to everything and anything. Like, I feel that they could land on the like White House lawn if they really want to make a statement, you know. But are we ready for that? Will our governments be open to that coming? Will it be weaponized? Will they be looked at as the other? Will we find someone else to hate so we can join the world collectively, like one of the past presidents have said? These are all questions that we need to address, and which is why, leading, circling it back to the beginning of this topic, which is why consciousness and contact goes hand in hand, which is why meditation and frequency goes hand in hand with ETs and disclosure, because it's not just about a nuts and bolts UFO kind of thing about these beings exist and what technology are they using and how can we use it to better our experience on Earth, but it's how do we even connect with these beings that vibrate at a frequency that we're not quite at yet. Are we at the frequency where we'll still create destruction and have an ego, have jealousy, have all types of things that come up for us that we can't even contact and communicate with these beings from a place of love? Is that why they're not even communicating with us now? Is that why we were in quarantine this whole entire time? Because we weren't at the consciousness level to even interact with these beings? And if that's the case, what we really need to do is work on ourselves individually. And this is how self empowerment and spirituality and consciousness has everything to do with disclosure, right? So what does meditation, um, sound and vibration frequency, eating well, and all this stuff have to do with UFOs? If you want to see that reality, you need to match that frequency. So how do we match that frequency? You do all the things in order to increase your vibration, to empower yourself, to release traumas from past lives, and not to forget the childhood mommy daddy issues that we all have, that literally act out every single day because we have been in this world, we've been raised unconsciously, so much so that we have too much trauma in even to interact with these beings, right? So what we're going to do now, what Portal to Ascension is about, what Brendon's about, what everybody on here really is about, is providing the tools of empowerment so that we can create a world where open contact is inevitable, right? So I feel that's the world that we're creating, and we just got to keep moving forward. And documentaries like Stephen Greer's one are just stepping stones into the right direction.
Awesome. Neil, thank you so much, man. I know we could just like keep diving into this and just talk for hours on this. What's your time frame like? Do you have to head out at some point?
I got like 45 minutes.
45 minutes. Okay, yeah, because I mean there is some stuff that I'd love to be able to just like ask you specifically about, but again, I just want to be able to
Yeah, go around. I'll be
pass the
hanging
talk
out.
Instagram. Okay, cool. So for anybody else, Lise, did you want to jump in next if you're heading out soon?
Yeah, I wanted to pick up on a couple of threads from, well, like drawing on like your introduction, and then also just touching on what Neil said as well. Just because there were a few words there that kind of um triggered a thought process for me, just in terms of the way that you guys are describing like contact and communication, and tools for that through meditation, and as one example. But what it's kind of bringing up for me is this reminder of essentially like shamanic practice, whether or not it's working in tandem with plant medicine. Historically, there has been a documentation, although it's been through like oral tradition, not so much through a kind of like academic written process of basically a communication with, I'll use the word entity because that's kind of quite a broad term really, but does allude to this like quality of an energy beyond the self, like a perceivable energy that is like somehow we can make contact and connection with, through an internal space, but is kind of large enough and has more qualities that are different for us to be able to discern that it's without out with us, if that makes sense. So um in like those relationships that are really grounded in a kind of like an earth medicine, and working with the elements and the directions and spirit animals and plants as a guide, there has always been reference to an other as well, and not just like an all pervading kind of consciousness, but um, there's a lot of reference to that in like Curandismo art, and lots of really amazing imagery, which kind of makes reference almost to this like idea of traveling, between dimensions. So you mentioned like this really cool imagery of like moving between the veils, as it were, and like moving between like bubbles and worlds. So this idea of like the shamanic journey really taps into that capability, um, where there's a possibility to interact with all these different strands, but it's kind of like the role of the channel is to like bring it back into like an earth-based perspective, so that all of these pieces of information that have been picked up on during that process of like receptivity and essentially dialogue and exchange, um, can kind of come back into like a grounded context that makes sense for the space and for the community. Um, so that's where the whole like notion of like the telepathic communication and this idea of like having energetic downloads really comes into play. And you mentioned earlier about the different realms and spaces in which that's possible. So I didn't make the last broadcast on kind of like lucid dreaming, but definitely the dream space is a hugely potent, powerful arena and playground, if you like, to be able to actually move into a more open and receptive space where that can actually be about play and about kind of how, oh my god, my battery's gonna die, hold on. Plug in the computer. Sorry guys, that was bad planning on my part.
No problem, Lise.
Yeah, so like moving into the dream space is definitely, for me at least, from my like one very poignant experience, been like an amazing way to make, okay, we've got power, to make that kind of contact and to make yeah, like come into a space, like you keep mentioning benevolence and holding like a quality in the heart space, which I think is obviously so important in being able to like move forward with progressive dialogues, which are essentially like self-reflexive, because any information that we're going at seeking in that outward space is like coming back to this mirroring quality, where we're trying to find new tools, new informations, new medicines, new practices, things to support us, things to help us problem solve, ways to evolve technology and capability. And obviously something that's like hugely on people's minds right now and is like really a pressing issue is the sustainability aspect. So yeah, I do feel quite often I will go into like a pre-sleep space with the intention of like entering into lucid dream state, and so much of that is actually about I have a problem in mind, or I have some information that I'm kind of trying to seek clarity on, and I don't necessarily make discriminations about where I'm going to find that information. Like the more open I can be, um, the the more receptive I am to realms and dimensions beyond what I could perceive on like a theoretical or logical framework. It kind of goes without saying that um yeah, all that we can do, as Neil mentioned, to kind of refine and crystallize our vessel, um like our ability to really connect on an intuitive level with being able to decipher these bits of information through whatever means we choose to journey into like another layer of consciousness. Then, you know, we're going to be able to over time allow these things to unpack, because I think quite often we get like a big download of information when sitting in meditation through like a visual prompt, or um, in our daydream space. It can be like a more passive experience. So I would say it's like, for me, just the openness and curiosity with the um with I think you mentioned actually, Brendon, like pure intent or something along those lines, and it was something that someone else mentioned the other day. They used the words innocent intent, which really resonated. They were actually talking about like dowsing and using crystals, but I think it applies laterally to everything. If we're approaching like the journey or the exploration to like the the far realms of the cosmos, like doing so with innocent intent definitely opens us up to beautiful experiences that have the opportunity to teach us a lot. um so yeah, I'm gonna tie those threads together there, and I don't have too much more to say on that, but yeah, I keep coming back to the idea of the shamanic journey, because it makes sense to me in that I can practice ritual and ceremony in very physical, practical, tangible ways on the earth, but the uh, extent to which those have ripples and effects beyond the physical space, there's a lot to be said for that. So the more we can ritualize and find kind of solidity in our approaches, the stronger and more resilient we become, I think, as vessels for information and contact, I suppose. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Beautiful. Lise, thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, again, like that's with this topic, like again, that's the thing. Like I think the topic of UFOs is undeniably like connected with all of these other like threads within like this bigger discussion related to spirituality and consciousness, and absolutely, again, in the context of like, you know, like preparing to be able to like develop relationship and contact and things like that. Like absolutely, yeah, it's happening in the dream space, it's happening in meditative space, it's happening through psychedelic experiences. And I mean, that in itself, you know, like for people who talk about meeting other entities on DMT and the self-transforming machine elves, like are they involved with the UFO phenomenon? Like are they is it separate? Are they in the same space? Are we going to their bubble when we do DMT and see the self-transforming machine elves, and then are the self-transforming machine elves the ones flying the transforming UFOs and stuff like that? Again, it's a lot of the mystery, but undeniably, like I think once we kind of start to understand that the entities, the UFOs, again, it's much more multidimensional than we realize. That yeah, it's like we're the contact is happening on many fronts. One thing that you just said real quick, and then Kris, did you want to go next? Did you have your hand up? Yeah. And again, just kind of, I know it's super easy to just kind of like dive into several of the topics that branch from this. We'll just kind of, and even within this topic, like it's specifically like UFOs and the shift in consciousness. In the past, we did one where it's like UFOs and aliens and the shift in consciousness. I encourage you guys to talk about what comes through in your heart, but we'll just try and keep it like centralized to a degree around the UFO stuff, just to be able to like, because otherwise I know it's super easy to just kind of like go off. But one of the things that I was going to say that I was thinking, what you were saying, Lise, when you were talking about the druids, is just kind of like visualizing and imagining how this would have been a part of their experience then. You know, like imagine like a druid like back in the day, like in the highlands and stuff like that. Who's to say they weren't like sitting on a hill doing sound mantras and like literally experiencing these phenomena where like lights would appear in the sky and start like responding and interacting and telepathically communicating and things like that. The UFO phenomenon is not something that just recently popped up. We have to assume that in the same way it's here right now, those same experiences have literally existed throughout all the eons. And I think if you actually look throughout the history, you actually see this consistently. You actually see that every single culture has some form of UFO sighting, and the UFO sightings are relatively similar. They vary, they kind of have different versions and everything like that, but nonetheless, it's some sort of object or light in the sky, and it kind of appears, and they don't really, you know, maybe it kind of appears, disappears, but then every now and then you also get the encounters where it's like literally they like land and they interact, and you know, they meet the people on the craft and stuff like that, and even the beings on the craft, like they are like kind of, again, like they're not always physically here, so to speak. And the other thing, I'll just mention this real quick, but we'll talk more about it later, is the crop circle phenomena, which is obviously connected with this. And I think the crop circle phenomena actually supports this idea that the inhabitants of the UFO, the civilization related to them, the individuals who are related to them, are actually here to be able to help evolve our consciousness. Because if you look at the crop circles that have appeared over the past like 20, 30 years, it's interesting because the crop circles only started appearing more so once we were able to start documenting them. They didn't just appear like back in the day when no one was flying planes. They started appearing once we were able to see them. And if you look at the symbolism of crop circles, all of it is like sacred geometry and higher conscious symbolism. And so when you think about it, it's almost as if the beings that are creating these crop circles, they're like artists. Like they're literally like creating an image, and they're like, yo, like this is something important. This is something that means something to us. And then they like project it, and again they interface with the material crop to be able to create an image. So they found kind of like this loophole where they can like indirectly communicate with us, because I think there probably is some sort of protocol where, and this is just kind of like, I don't know for sure, but I just feel like wherever they're coming from, if they have their own civilization or something, maybe they have a protocol where like, yeah, you can go visit Earth in your UFOs, but don't interact with them in a way that like breaks the rules. Like maybe they have their own laws, like space laws and stuff like that. So if you like get in a UFO and you come to Earth and then you get in there and then you like start interacting, like that might be against like some sort of rules that they, again, I don't know, but it seems like they definitely have their own protocol where they're kind of like, they want us to do it on their own, but they're still interacting in a way that's kind of passive. And for those who have like the perception to see it, is like quite literal and explicit at the same time. Anyways, okay, I guess I did just talk a little bit about crop circles, but Kris, I'll pass it over to you, dude. I know you have a lot to say on this as well, so go right ahead. And thank you again, Lise.
Yeah. Wow. Like, I just feel like, so much information has been shared and stuff like that. And like, I don't know, I'm like working on just developing like, my patience more, and like being able to, cause like, I feel like sometimes like I latch on to like, each individual thing that's being said, and I'm always writing down so much information. And it's because like, I'm like so excited to just like, jump in and share some of my perspectives that everyone like, like kind of touched upon. And I wanted to actually like, one thing that was really awesome, I feel like, that Neil said was actually like, he mentioned Lisa Royal Holt. and actually like I like read with like the set of tarot cards that she created, which is the galactic heritage cards, and it's literally like all about like kind of exploring this journey from our original state of like unity to like fragmentation. So like it's this original state of like unified consciousness, like like in this unified field of creation, which is like our true state of being, where it like that is like the idea of like being God, like being able to see through the eyes of everything. And then like kind of this fragmentation into like group consciousness, which is still like non-physicalized. So, like like we like talk about like the idea of like dimensions and stuff like that, and like like interdimensional beings that like can phase in and out of like our dimension in order to like better communicate with us and stuff. And like that is like kind of like the understanding like of like that I have like of these beings and stuff like that, that essentially is that like like they are helping to accelerate or to aid in our like ascension or evolutionary process through their interaction like with us. And you can say like through their interaction with us, but it's through our interaction with them, which is really an aspect of ourselves. So like it's so like like it touches upon that aspect, Brendon, that you were talking about too, like where you were just saying like it's like we like kind of talk about like UFOs as if like they're out there, but like it's really kind of like these like higher dimensional aspects of ourself that are like communicating with us, but it's like kind of us communicating with with that. But anyway, like like I'm getting like wrapped up in that idea. But anyway, like I wanted to just even like um touch upon like this I mean, I wanted to touch upon like so many different things, but yeah, like um I think like like so like I was reading this one article like basically talking about like exploring the phenomenon of UFOs like within this framework of like that consciousness is intentional and can like willed or unwilled like reach out and grasp the essential meanings implicit in existence in the contents of consciousness itself. So basically like when we like are vibrating at higher levels of individual consciousness, then like we become aware of increasing meaningfulness like within the world around us, so that it's like we extrapolate meanings from like certain like encounters and stuff like that that we have, and we interpret those like as you were explaining your experience like with like a possible UFO like encounter that you had last night. And it's kind of like your interaction with that experience like has to do with the fact that like your kind of like willingness to accept it as being something that's communicating with you. So it's kind of like I feel like like in a lot of ways it actually has to do like with like upending the aspect of our rational minds trying to grasp everything, and actually like leading to this kind of merger between the intuitive and the rational faculty of our mind that like always needs this explanation. And it's kind of like that's not like the whole story of everything, but it's kind of like the fact that UFOs, like I know I'm touching upon a lot of things here, but like the fact that UFOs like phase in and out like a lot of the times in their appearances and stuff like that, like is literally pointing to the fact of like consciousness itself being this fluid kind of thing that is not like physical in structure, but that is rather like able to shift in and out of like dimensions. And it's kind of like the whole idea of communicating with these like interdimensional beings, I think, is kind of like like an initiating contact is kind of like preparing us to enter into that state where we are recognizing that they have like always been a part of this world and stuff like that. And it's kind of like what it says in this one article too that I wanted to just kind of like touch upon here. And like this is an article written like in relation to this guy named David J. Moore, and he talks about the evolutionary metaphor, which is like basically and anyway like it's talking about the idea of consensus reality. And if he wrote that like he wrote that I ended by coming to believe that although UFO phenomena seem to contradict consensus reality, they do not contradict the reality described by quantum physics, or for that matter, mystics. All the evidence seems to show that we should not regard UFOs as spacecraft, but as unknown energy forms. And basically, like he kind of talks about how the perfect purpose of UFO phenomenon seem to be heuristic, and that is they're designed to teach us something or to change our attitude towards reality. So to change the general consensus that reality is this materialistic like like third dimensional kind of like physical construct, and that like, you know, like that there are these interdimensional beings that have been like assisting in our evolutionary process, and that actually, like, you know, as Neil was talking about too, like actually has to do with like the seeding of our like race in general. Like they had to do with like, you know, like kind of like the human project of like, you know, creating us, and that like it was kind of this like the earth itself is kind of this breeding ground, or this kind of like test tube in a way of like a lot of these different like ET um genetics and stuff like that, that have to do with like, you know, like our connection to the stars, and the whole idea, you know, like where it's called like we're like a lot, that whole term like being star seeded and stuff like that is literally like, you know, like aspects of ourself like are basically seeded from these like other you know, I say other, you know, but like seeded from these like, you know, Arcturus, or, you know, from the Pleiades system, or, you know, like from the Sirian system, and like, you know, like through kind of the lessons that they have to teach us, it kind of like, you know, is bringing us back to that, like bringing us back to recognizing like our unified state of like um having all of these parts contained within us, and that like, you know, we are not like these separate beings, but rather like, you know, like going about like our existence, but rather like, you know, like we are actually like, you know, part of like this galactic community that we kind of just have lost touch with. And that's like the whole aspect that I wanted to touch upon. And yeah, I'm not going to go like too much further because I want to, you know, let everyone else add, but yeah, I just like was so excited to like kind of share that, was just that like, you know, it's kind of like that the UFO phenomenon kind of becomes this like poignant symbol of, you know, inner transformation. And the more that we can kind of like, you know, transform ourselves, that like that is kind of when we can initiate contact with these beings, is when we start to kind of let go of the idea that they're separate from us, and that they're kind of like these aspects that want to help communicate with us, but they can't unless we kind of like open ourselves up to initiating contact. And like, you know, like, yeah, like that just goes into the whole Stephen Greer stuff with like, you know, all these groups coming to that heart-centered space and like initiating contact like with them, and then like getting that reflection back. And like, you know, like that goes into that idea that, you know, like we influence the reality that we're like co-creators of this reality, and that like, you know, when we intentionally shape it with our intention, and so that when we kind of like call upon something, that those like kind of consciousnesses can come and assist us, because they are kind of one and the same. And that when we like accept that state and we're vibrating at that level of unity consciousness where we don't see them as other, you know, like that's when they can actually interact and interface with us. So yeah.
Awesome. Beautifully well said, Kris. Is just enjoying listening to that. And again, you know, like I think it's great for us to just be able to practice having these conversations, because I think like a lot of the stuff that's coming up here is on point. And again, that's not to say like, hey, everything we say here is absolute finite truth. Again, anything that we're saying here, like the objective at the end of the day is to think for yourself. We're all just trying to piece this together. And I'll just say either Rachel or Kelly, let me know who wants to go next as we pass this around. But again, you're right. You know, like going back to the overall intention of this broadcast, like why are we having this discussion? And again, what's kind of coming? Like that's why we're having this discussion. What's kind of coming, and how do we prepare for it, and what does that look like? And again, I think it is this idea of really just, it's a story of unity. It's a story of love. And I'm not just trying to sound cliche about that either. It's a story of, again, you know, it's like, it sounds like something out of a sci-fi story where, again, you know, it's like literally in Star Trek where it's like suddenly like it may be this point where we just kind of like start like maybe like this is kind of crazy to think and everything like that. First of all, if you guys if my microphone sounds kind of weird, let me know. If it sounds like hard, let me know. I'm just trying to adjust it. But again, you know, in Star Trek we kind of have this visualization of a future where aliens and humans are just walking amongst each other. Is that possible? Like because this is where it gets into this crazy idea of you know, like if they're coming here in their ships, and if these ships can literally land, like, is it possible for like a bus of them to come and then to like get out and then to like live here or something like that? Like, I don't know. You start getting into these crazy ideas or something. Like, is that going to be a thing? Like alien immigrants or something like that? Like the ultimate immigrant, the ultimate alien from another dimension. And then like, again, you know, like it's I know it sounds cliche and stuff like that, but I mean, I don't know. Anything's on the table at this point. And again, just knowing that these are real, what comes next, what comes beyond that, and how do we prepare? But again, I think everybody here is already on the right path of, again, just being able to understand that, like, we ourselves are ambassadors for these next steps within the story. And again, how do we anchor those steps within the story of being, again, this deeper understanding of ourselves and the cosmos inside and outside, and love and empowerment, and understanding that, again, you know, on a very metaphysical level, this is about us awakening to the idea that, like, we are dreamers within this dream. And like, and even the aliens, like, are they, like, they're not outside of this either, right? Like, it's like, it's really trippy, man. And that's where, again, just kind of keeping it within one topic is valuable for today, because this could easily just kind of spiral out into all sorts of discussions. But yeah, again, just kind of passing over to Rachel or Kelly, and again, just kind of like focusing in this on this idea of, like, what do you guys feel we as humans kind of need to keep in mind? And of course, I would love to be able to hear some personal experiences of any UFO sightings you have seen. I will just share briefly that, again, going back to the original sighting that I saw of, like, that triangle shape, I still remember the visceral experience of it. Like, the visceral experience of it stays with me to this day. It was very much like a heart experience, even though it was like, I don't know what the frick that is, but it was just like, magic is real. Like, that's, like, in that moment I was like, oh my goodness, like, magic is real, you know? And that's when you kind of start to understand that, like, magic is reality. And then you, of course, you have that beautiful quote where, like, the technologies of the future would be indistinguishable from magic, what we consider to be magic and everything like that. You take a cell phone and you bring it back to the 1600 and people be like, oh, what is this device, and everything like that. And another thing I'll just say really quickly is that, again, you know, this reality that we're in, we have to understand that even though we think we understand it, in a lot of ways, there's other aspects to it that we don't. But we're still a part of it, but we're still interfacing with it. And we can still learn how to operate within it. In the same way, like seriously, do you know how your computer works? Do you know how your cell phone works? Do you know how these technological devices work? No, you really don't. Like, you got a general idea, you know, there's wires and signals and stuff, but you really don't. In the same way, like, this reality, like, do we really know how it works? Like, no, we really don't, because it's quite advanced, and it's more advanced than our again, like, our science and stuff like that. But of course, the quantum side of things is really starting to dig into stuff. And once you understand that, like, it is this idea that, you know, thought is faster than speed, or thought is faster than light, I mean. And that is what these beings, that is what these, like, highly evolved conscious beings operate with. They operate at the level of thought. They operate at the level of consciousness. So forget light speed travel, think thought speed travel, which is, again, the quantum entanglement of it. So again, I'll pass over to Rachel, and then maybe we'll hear from Kelly or Neil, whoever, or if anybody else has to jump out early, just let me know. Rachel, go right ahead. Pass it over to you. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Yeah, this is such a fascinating topic, and it is so hard to keep it condensed down into just talking about. I actually love the term that Kris mentioned from the quote that he gave about unknown energy forms, as opposed to using UFOs. Maybe one day we will all be saying UEFs instead. Who knows? But yeah, I feel like it's really, I feel like it's almost impossible to take the idea of consciousness and how our consciousness is played into it when talking about this, though. So I just wanted to touch on the idea of there's an experiment that science did, and I'm sure there's many other experiments as well. And there was one mentioned in the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind documentary, but the one that I was familiar with, which is a similar idea, is the double slit experiment. And Kris and I were actually talking about this a couple days ago. But the double slit experiment is basically our consciousness and us being observers having an effect on the particles and not being able to explain why or how, but just knowing that they do, that us observing does. So it's impossible to take our consciousness out of the equation, and the idea that our consciousness is the entire universe is contained within our consciousness, because our consciousness is not this 3D reality that we are perceiving right now. It's a 10-dimensional bubble of consciousness, which is impossible to describe in 3-dimensional terms. So to even talk about it right now is it's kind of impossible to even get to the bottom of it, because the 10th dimension is everything's possible, everything imaginable, and we can't even conceive of that or explain it. So I actually did have an experience today while I was meditating, and again, not a traditional UFO per se, but I mean, forget everything we know, right? I was sitting outside in the grass, actually listening to one of Steve Greer's meditations, and just laying in the grass, and I had a fly land on my foot. And actually, towards the end of the meditation, I sat up and it was still on my foot, and I watched it erratically running around on my foot, and just me noticing my perception of the way the grass was moving. It was like I was having a psychedelic experience, but I was completely sober just from meditating. Like, suddenly was like watching nature breathe, in a way that I actually haven't really experienced doing meditation before, and not just like, I mean, the connection with nature was very important too, but it was kind of like thinking like, okay, like there is energy outside of myself here right now that I am interacting with, and it's not just me in this moment. It is like, I did feel like I had made contact with something from potentially outside of this planet, and not necessarily like seeing a UFO per se. Um, and I feel like, as far as thinking of times where I might have seen something, I can't actually pinpoint a specific experience. Like, it feels like a dream when I try to think of a um, specific maybe encounter that I might have had. I just feel like I'm recalling dreams and memories that I can't actually put tangible thought to, um, which is kind of interesting, because I feel like in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I've definitely experienced unidentified energy forms, outside of, you know, what I was talking about with my meditation today. But again, can't specifically say what that might have been. Um, but yeah, I think it's very important to keep remembering too that, again, what Kris and Lise were saying, that it is our consciousness too, like, and our ability to um, realize that inside of us, that the love and the gratitude that we have, and just coming from, again, this was in the documentary too, just like a place of pure hearted, pure mind, pure intentions of just being open to all the possibilities, and not closing yourself off to anything, not putting thoughts, specific thoughts in your head about making contact, and just allowing that to come to you. And it's not like summoning higher beings from other planets to you, and again, not like this other, it's inviting that energy in to come to you. And so I feel like that's really the whole UFO thing too, is that energy is recognizing your vibration, so it's coming to you to vibrate in your space, in your field, where you can witness and see the phenomena of a visible physical unidentified flying object or energy form. But yeah, I guess that's kind of really all I had to say, was just, again, reiterating the importance of our consciousness is not just us in this physical body, that we are, and really recognizing, again, reiterating, I feel like we talk about this all the time in these discussions, the importance of our connection to each other, that we are uh, universally connected. We have this universal consciousness, and not even just with us on Earth as this species, but with the entire universe, that we have this universal connection. And even in like the multiverse, like taking it even bigger, like there is a universal connection with all of us. And I first really started believing that when I studied yin yang theory, because that is what yin yang theory is all about. It's that it's the 10,000 things transforming into each other constantly all the time, but it's really just this one thing together. um Sorry, I feel like I got off topic there for a second. Oh my gosh, I had one more thing to say. What was it? um it's okay, I lost my train of thought. um yeah, anyway, that's all.
Awesome. Just let me know when that thought comes back. It's like floating around the room right now. You're like, get it. So yeah, not a problem. So awesome. And so Thank you, Rachel, for sharing. And a couple of things just came into mind. And Kelly, give me your hands up if you want to pass it over to you next. Yeah, okay, perfect. So one of the things I'll just mention real quick here relative to this topic, because it hasn't even been brought up so far. Again, there are many different forms of UFOs, and obviously we associate UFOs with being, a light off in the horizon or maybe a craft landing and everything like that. UFOs, I think, are something that can come in many different shapes and sizes. Specifically, sizes literally down to the point with what we recognize as like orbs are still a part of the same phenomena. Like, I literally think it's the same thing because there's videos like there's actually like a beautiful video from back in the day, and there's like these two orbs and they're floating above a field, and they literally make crop circles appear underneath them. This is like back from the 90s. And it's like, it's legit. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is amazing. But again, thinking back, I actually have footage. It's on my YouTube channel. Maybe I'll have to share it with you guys in the Discord chat. And it's like literally from 2011. And I was in this very high vibe state, and I was working out on the gymnasium playground near my house. And within the footage, I was filming it as like an exercise video. And then I went back and I checked it. And within the video, there's like clearly these like weird like orb things that kind of like appear and phase out of dimension, and to the point where I'm just like, yo, those were not bugs. And this video is actually like something that's got like over 100,000 views on my YouTube. It's literally my most popular video. But again, even experiences like those, it's like it's the quasi-dimensional beings and stuff like that we're dealing with. And the way how I've made sense of it, and I didn't explain this yet this broadcast, even though this is kind of like a big thing to keep in mind, is that some of these vehicles, and I'll just mention this real quick and pass it to Kelly, is this idea of the Merkaba light ship. And so the Merkaba light ship is this like literal understanding of this like energetic field that's around our body that we all have, and it's the star tetrahedron. So imagine a pyramid one way, a pyramid the other, interlace them, and one kind of rotates one way and one rotates the other way. So what if I were to tell you that literally within each of our beings, we literally have like an interdimensional spaceship built into our stuff? Like, we don't need a physical craft. We literally have it. And it just needs to be understood and activated. And this is, again, where it gets into the idea of the shift in consciousness. So this is where you get into this idea that, like, basically some of the UFO sightings would literally be like a being with their Merkaba activated, like flying around, like through dimensional space. And then in the same way, they can also be very, very small, so to speak. And this is where you might get the small orbs and stuff, or the small spirits and things like that. So it starts kind of like blending into other stuff related to like spirits and everything like that as well. But I just wanted to be able to mention that, because I think in a lot of cases that does kind of apply, where it's like this idea of like the Merkabas, they're literally like quote unquote like ascended masters, like flying through the sky. But I don't even think it's just like an ascended master. I think it's probably just like a citizen from a civilization of ascended masters. Like, it's not like there is no master in that civilization. That's just them. That's just the norm, so to speak. But to us, they might appear to be again, obviously, this advanced conscious being. But again, like the topic being here, the UFO and the shift in consciousness. This is why we're having this discussion, because when having this discussion, it undeniably shifts and expands our consciousness, our awareness of reality, our awareness of ourself, and our awareness of our potential within it. And it gives us a bit of direction to be able to understand that all of this, like meditation and yoga and dream journaling and eating veggies and stuff, this is starting to pay off. It's starting to lead up to something, and it's literally allowing us to be in a vibrational state where we're ready to begin interfacing on a conscious level with other beings that can match our consciousness. So consciousness is a vibrational frequency. So Kelly, I'll pass it over to you, and thank you so much for being here. And I know excited to hear what you have to share. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hey everyone. So yeah, definitely want to piggyback off of you in regards to the Merkaba. I had a 2-year experience where I was an open channel for interdimensional communication. And during that process, one of the main things that with the connection was really the vibrational frequencies and the signature frequencies that came through. my awareness is that a lot of the ships that came about were, like you said, they were essentially like consciousness ships. They were out of what it would be a higher dimensional platform of existence where they no longer use physicality. And that being said, they would be able to traverse not only dimensions, but parallel probabilities of timelines and be able to maneuver around there based on the frequency of the timeline. So one thing that I definitely learned from the experience was freedom, love, consciousness, the power to choose, and no fear. That was one of my first downloads that came through, and through that, it's just part of the soul coding for me of just my soul navigating through there, and that's how I'm able to connect. I even will just repeat those words over and over again. And I've definitely seen that there are other interworld, like interdimensional, interworld crafts as well. I believe that inside of our consciousness, there are worlds in there as well, that it is a just probabilities of information and also consciousness levels. And one of those being that being able to see the light ships in your actual mind's eye. I've actually seen them when I've closed my eyes, and they have actually been like, it looked like a light, and it was almost like what you would see like a machine elf in a way. It broke, it fractalized and became this ship, and it was so close up in my mind's view. It was like I was looking at it, but it was like I had my eyes open. So there's, I believe, different ways of communication, and with the frequencies that come in, they're also, for at least for my experience, have also been when connecting with them, you gain a frequency inside of yourself when you start to synchronize with these ships. And one thing is definitely grounding that has helped me, and also really just opening my heart. One time I had a communication back from the ship, and it was just love shooting through my heart chakra, complete, just overwhelming love, to the point where everything was completely synchronous. I lived in synchronization for a good 6 months, where everything was completely synchronized, like even the lights and everything. And it was like everything was so smooth and consistent, because I was completely connected with this ship and these beings, where our thought processes were intertwined with one another, where there'd be life lessons that would come through, and it would be completely all in synchronization with one another, working as a collective unit. So I definitely see that in this coming future, there have been a lot of disclosures that have come about. One of them being that hasn't been mentioned is the storming Area 51. Now, that was a soft disclosure, but by having Bob Lazar go onto the Joe Rogan podcast and be able to really awaken the world in regards to the the Area 51, what's going on over there, and he got a lot of validity in that podcast, and that sparked millions of people interested in seeing them aliens. They were, and the cool thing about it, it was a positive disclosure, because everyone wanted to go in there and save the aliens. That was the whole thing. So they weren't going to storm Area 51 just to like go and try to like get the aliens. They really wanted to save the aliens. So in a lot of ways, it's bringing about a lot of soft disclosures in a way that are just getting people excited about it. People are no longer fearing it. One of the life lessons that I was taught during the 2 years as being like an open channel was that everything is valid. It's just about making a choice. Everything is just a probability. And wherever you are, you can recalibrate from that point forward. And then you have another their spectrum of potentialities. But it's all about the human beings having their own conscious freedom of choice. So that's definitely one thing that I hold to this day. And like, I really hold these beings really, they've always been just beyond it. It feels like family when they're around. It feels as if they're like, you're connected, and you go to a state of oneness where you can communicate with them through their soul frequencies and your soul signature that's not on the third dimensional level, but on a higher state of reality, a higher level of frequency. And it is like just a sacred union of sorts. And you are me and I am you, or I am me and you are me and I am you in synchronicity. So it is all about they're living their lives parallel to our own, and in a sense they are another version of ourselves in a parallel version of reality. And so it's just up to us now to, as light workers, to ground this light. I've been working with activating the Merkabas for people, helping them get awareness of their light bodies so that you can navigate to the proper timeline and frequency through using your light body and your Merkaba, getting that online and tethering to those different frequencies, and really opening up and gravitating, the law of gravitation, and also quantum entanglement at the same time. But yeah, it's been a really cool thing. And, it'd be really awesome if all of us got together as a collective and just built our own spaceship too. Like, that would be so cool. There's so many of us with all really awesome smarts. And I just wish that we all would just get together and build our own spaceship at some point. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, and so it is, and so it is. So that's actually been like this like running kind of joke where I'm like, yeah, like one of these days, like we're gonna build our spaceship, and I'm gonna fly around, and I'm gonna pick you guys up, and then we're gonna have like a dance party on the spaceship. Like, I've been talking about that for like, the past 10 years. So it's manifesting, it's coming, it's almost here. So awesome. Thank you, Kelly, so much for sharing, and for sharing your heart and your wisdom and your experience. And again, we're gonna pass the talking stick over to Neil in a second, but just kind of going back to this discussion, this topic of thinking about, like, what is needed right now. I mean, it's not so much this idea of like what is needed in relation to specifically UFOs and stuff like that. The fact is, what is needed right now is for us to be able to help elevate the collective consciousness of the entire planet. And UFOs are a part of that. And so again, this is something that comes up in the CE5 documentary, where right now for a lot of us, for those of us who, we're working on things on a personal level, on a one-to-one level, but for others of us who are, creating content online and connecting with people and everything like that, like, let's keep doing what we can to be able to help support each other, to be able to help, again, facilitate conscious discussion, get people curious, practice meditations. Like, part of my work that I'm doing, like, I'm planning on engineering probably multiple videos that are going to be related to this topic to be able to help get this information out and basically initiate our own version of disclosure on like through 60-second videos that I'm going to engineer to go viral on TikTok. Like, I mean, the video that I made of the blue beings, that video has been seen by over like 100,000 people. Like, I've mentioned this before, but like, I think there's people who are working in TikTok who actually want to be able to see the shift in consciousness happening. And so they're finding content, and it eventually, and it's not just the algorithm, eventually content will reach a person and they'll be like, yo, this is actually really good for the awakening of consciousness. Let's put it out in front of the million, an audience of millions of people, sort of thing. And there's a lot of people who are coming across my content and they're just like, yo, like, this was on my For You page. This was just sent to me through the algorithm. But it's making me think about things. It's questioning things. So we have this power right now where we get to write the narrative, where we get to shape how disclosure is actually happening. And that's the idea. It's going to be a grassroots thing. It's from the heart center out. It's not just this thing where, again, like, it's not just the government and stuff like that anymore. And I think people are starting to realize that on a global scale, where it's like what, like why, like since when did we agree to this idea that the government rules the world and rules all of our lives? It's like we are sovereign individual beings, and it's like we have that right within ourselves to choose how we interact and interface with this reality and the stories and the narratives that we are creating. But again, for all of us here, I think whether you're specifically explicitly talking to people about UFOs is one thing, but just to be able to invite people back to the heart space is the objective. Like that is the objective, I would say, to simplify. And I've said that before numerous times, without trying to make it sound complicated. What are we trying to do? We're leading people back to the wisdom of their own heart. And with this, this will eventually naturally kind of open them up to the bigger interdimensional UFO related topics when they're ready for it. But I think we kind of have to be, we kind of have to honor the fact that there are going to be some people that it's not like timing is important. Like I think there's actually more harm that can be done if we go about this the wrong way and just start flooding people with all this interdimensional knowledge and stuff like that. I think we kind of have to kind of like ease them into it. It's kind of like, again, The Matrix was a documentary. It was literally kind of like showing us how to do it. And within that, again, you kind of got to ease people into this bigger picture of the universe. It literally can kind of like make them pop and everything like that. But I think we're doing it. I think we really are doing it. And for some of us who are at that point where we're just like, yo, I'm ready to like meditate and make contact and develop these relationships, some of us will be there. But for others, pace yourself, practice on connecting with your heart, build up like your physical vessel, your physical body, and the experiences will arrive to you over time. Stay curious, connect the dots. You're doing it. You're doing just fine where you are. And again, and I think what's going to be important, I'll pass this over to Neil in a second, is that again, we have to anticipate the idea that these conversations are going to start showing up more in the mainstream. And so we, as like community members, have to kind of be in that place where we're ready to help facilitate the discussion, where we're ready to kind of start like having conversation. We may find that like you may be that person who's been talking about aliens and UFOs for the past decade, and then suddenly some of your friends are going to start talking about aliens and UFOs, and they're going to come to you. And they're going to be like, yeah, like, can I talk to you about this? Like, can you explain some of this to me? And so how do we explain that to them? And again, that's going to be part of our growth. Like we literally are ambassadors for this story. So like, that's the thing. It's really trippy once you start to understand that we're here, but the aliens, again, I like even the term alien. I feel like the word alien, like the word alien needs, I think there's something else. I think there's another word than just alien, because I think that has such a strong connotation and symbolic imagery to it. There's another word to it. Again, the other us, maybe, the other us's or something like that, right? But again, the other us's, like they are a part of this story too. They are a part of the synchronicity. Like they are a part of the shift in consciousness that is happening. And then for us, who's to say that some of us aren't just the ones that agreed to commit ourselves to being right here, right now. Like, again, kind of what Kelly was saying, these UFOs, these aliens, who's to say that's not where we came from? Who's to say we aren't actually a part of those civilizations, and that some of us are literally like time travelers and stuff like that? This is when it starts to get like really shifty and stuff like that. But I want you to just kind of like be open to it and allow yourself to just kind of like feel into this without getting distracted by it, but allow it to be a narrative that's going to call you into your purpose. So yeah, we'll just leave it there. But again, we're doing it. This is about the shift in consciousness. This is about bringing people back to the heart, seeing the unity, the connection, the magic, the power, the potential within themselves, and then allowing them to step into that bigger story and purpose where they see themselves as a hero of their own journey within this journey of unfolding into a bigger picture of what the human species is about. So, and again, the word human is more than just us. The hues of mana. So the aliens, the other us's, they're still humans, hues of mana. So anyways, Neil, we'll pass it over to you, dude. And if you have to head out or anything like that, maybe give us some closing thoughts, but whatever you feel called to share, go ahead. And one thing I was going to ask, Neil, you've been to some CE5 events, or can you share a little bit about like your experience if you've like had UFO sightings or any personal experience and anything else? Yeah, go for it, Neil.
So I went to a couple of CE5s. Well, I went to one with Greer, and then I did two with people that were a part of Greer's team, but they do like independent CE5s in different states. One was in Colorado. I think one was here in California a while ago. Two of them, there wasn't really anything. There actually was nothing. And one of them, we saw some lights in the distance. The one time, out of the two times that I went without Greer, we used sound frequencies once and we meditated. And the other time we just went into nature and meditated and, attempted to connect to that consciousness. But I've done CE5 as well, like hanging out at home or at an Airbnb with some friends. And then like, instead of busting out a Ouija board, someone's like, do you want to do CE5? And then we just like meditate and look outside, Sometimes the same things, nothing hardcore tangible to be like, oh my God, like, because I've seen some other things before. Like I saw at Corona del Mar here near the beach down here in Newport. This one I'll never forget. Like I was standing on these rocks overlooking like the wedge where the water hits the rocks, and looked up into the sky, and there was this star like blinking star that looked like too close to be a star, and it was broad daylight. It was probably mid-afternoon, like 3 or 4, and all of a sudden this wormhole like thing opened up and sucked the matter of this thing in it, and it just completely went off. And there was me and 3 of my friends, and we saw that. And I've seen that exact same kind of setup maybe 5 or 6 years later when I was driving home from a festival. I looked up in the sky and I saw this crazy thing, and I saw the same thing. Like it literally looked like a wormhole. Some craft went in it and just took off like something out of sci-fi. So those were just independent, just experiences that I had. The major CE5 where I've actually seen things based on collective consciousness meditation happened at Asceti Ranch. Are you familiar with Asceti Ranch, Brendon?
Go ahead and just tell people about it.
Yeah. So Asceti Ranch is a place in southeast Washington. Basically, you drive up to Portland, you follow the border east of Oregon and Washington, you cross over a bridge, you get into Washington, and there's a mountain there. Forget the name of the mountain right now. Forget the name of the mountain, but they have a mountain there, and there's a lot of sightings. So this land that James Gilliland has created his ranch on, called the Asceti Ranch, enlightened contact with extraterrestrial intelligence, is basically the full name of it. There's sightings all the time. You pretty much can go there and be guaranteed a sighting. Like I feel comfortable telling people that go there and you'll see something, because I went there with those same doubts, and I went there 3 times, and I stayed at least 3 days each time. And the night that I decided to come out on all 3 of those journeys, there was actually like something there, and something that I could see. Even one time, I was not even hanging out with everybody that was in the field doing CE5, and I was like in a treehouse, because they on the land they had a treehouse with a bed in the top, and my bed was right there, and then there's a balcony overlooking the whole entire ranch from the treehouse right next to a lake, and I was just hanging out on the balcony, and I looked up, and there was this like thing way, way far away, just like definitely it wasn't a satellite, but it was definitely like some sort of actual thing that was moving through the sky. And then all the way in the field area, they had also spotted it, but it just happened to be over me, which was like, yards away from where they were. And they had one of those lasers where they literally can, like, it looks like they're touching the UFO. So they were pointing the laser at it, and I could see them, pointing the laser at this craft. Then I was like, okay, next day I went down to the field, and oh my God, the biggest light show ever. Here's this mountain, and I got to tell you the name of the mountain, actually. Asceti Ranch Mountain. Let's find out what it is. What's the name of this mountain? Okay, maybe I'll find it. Mount Adams. Okay. So basically I was looking out there, and there were just lights all over the mountain. Like literally, like it looked like somebody was up there trying to like just flash lights all over the place. Just one light will flash, another one will flash, another one will flash. And then you'll see something coming out of it, and then you'll see a craft above it. I'm telling you, it was serious. And even at one point, all of a sudden, there was a blacked out helicopter, like definitely some government, some sort of elite organization, blacked out helicopter. And we witnessed them, right? This is before it became dark, witnessed them land somewhere on the mountain. And then they might have had weapons or something. You couldn't see because it was pretty far away, but we saw people get out of this helicopter and walk towards a cave, the same cave we had been seeing lights coming out of the whole day before. So fast forward another year, which is actually takes us 2 years ago. I go to a SETI ranch, and there's this remote viewer there, and this remote viewer just happened to work as an independent contractor for the FBI and remote viewing different ETs, in which he stumbled onto finding ETs accidentally. He was remote viewing for a terrorist counter-terrorist intelligence. He was remote viewing for them, and during his remote viewing of counter terrorists, he accidentally met an extraterrestrial and then dedicated his whole entire remote viewing firm to finding out ETs. When he did that, he started searching online, and what did he find? Mount Adams, all these UFO sightings. So then he got his whole FBI remote viewing team to start remote viewing Mount Adams. And what they found there, they started drawing, because remote view is like all like crazy scientists, like drawing all types of crazy equations and stuff everywhere. They started drawing out all the things that they were seeing, and there were these beings, lion type beings with big manes that were humanoid. There were these mantis beings, and these people have never heard or seen any of this stuff or are in the community. So this guy goes ahead and contacts James Gilliland and says, "Hey man, like, you know, I heard that you are next to this place and you have this ranch where people come and have these sightings. I've been remote viewing some of your stuff. Would love to come out there and show you what we found. You know, I used to contract work for the FBI. Show you what I found and see if there's any validity to this." Lo and behold, he walks into a SETI ranch, and what's the artwork everywhere? The same exact stuff that they were finding out and drawing. Lion beings, all types of artwork everywhere, based on channeling and conscious connection to these beings, not the physical remote viewing stuff that this guy had. So it was a crazy vetting out of this experience. So go back to where I was taking a look at all this stuff. What we figured out was what the remote viewer figured out, the FBI agent, the FBI contractor, he was actually remote viewing to see what was actually going on in this place and why there were so many sightings. And what he discovered was in this mountain there was a huge pole shift, meaning that the negative and the positive polarities in this mountain were at its complete extremes, right? You know, things are pretty balanced, but in the world, but this mountain specifically just had a huge polarity shift from negative and positive. And what happens when you have a huge negative and positive polarity shift is you create a rip in the dimensions. Like you almost create a teleporting area where people can come to the same localized area within their dimension, and the negative positive rip in space time creates this type of portal where all these beings can transfer their consciousness and their craft. Some were flying in Merkabas. Those are images that the remote viewer drew as well. And they were coming in this area like it was this huge like intergalactic teleportation / airport that they were coming to in order to go to different dimensions. So I did some more research, and there's other places like Mount Shasta is exactly the same. It has a huge polarity shift. I mean, you can go there with these types of devices and actually measure the polarities, and you see the negative and positive and know that there's some anomaly going on there. And due to this anomaly, it creates this rip in space-time, all these beings are able to come in and out. So that was kind of like really drilled it home for me. It drilled it home so much that I literally cried in his presentation because of the affirmations from this guy that worked for the FBI. He was like vetting out all this stuff based on just doing it without even knowing about this stuff. So SETI Ranch was probably I would say like the smoking gun of extraterrestrial UFO craft experiences for me. Besides that, I've had, you know, experiences here and there. I used to really like beg. Like I straight out went to sleep begging to be abducted. And I know some people might get offended by that because I know a lot of abductees that have had traumatic experiences, and they were like upset when I used to be like, dude, I wish I would get abducted because like I'm in this community, I'm doing this work. I would love to have a tangible experience of it that I come back with, so that I have this grounded, like this is real. I just experienced it myself. Let me go forward with my mission. And then through a meditation experience, I had to download that, you know, it's about really moving forward with this information without the need to know. Like the whole need to know actually keeps me further away from the truth. So now I'm getting to a place where I'm accepting that, you know, I feel like I'm a conduit of this information to come out with it. And the more that I accept this, the more that I trust in it, the more I'm actually having these experiences, and I'm realizing what my dream states are, what messages I've been getting in the past. And it doesn't have to happen through open land in front of your face communication, right? Even Bashar has said, and many other channels and other writers have said, that if you were to have open contact communication, like face to face with a lot of these beings, your body vibrates at such a level that it literally cannot stand the frequency of the being that you're in front of. And you might consciously, like your brain might say, oh man, this is the coolest thing ever, I can't I'm gonna stay here, I can't wait, oh my god, they're about to land. But your body has its own consciousness, and it will respond and react to the frequency without you even being able to consciously choose to shift it. That people have run away from UFO craft even though they really mentally wanted to stay there, and it's just because their body couldn't actually perceive the frequency. Now, what does this remind you of? Almost every story of every god in the history of humanity. Zeus, right? Like, what's the whole thing with Zeus? You can't look at him directly. What's the whole thing about Ra? You can't look at him directly. What about all this, the sun cults and religions that came about? You can't look directly in the sun because this physical extraterrestrial incarnation of the sun is too bright for us to even perceive. So I feel that this story of extraterrestrials and frequency shift has actually permeated and infiltrated every single religion in the world, that we're speaking about the same thing. It's really a frequency shift. So that's kind of my 2 cents right there on it. And I want to give maybe some closing thoughts on it, but did you want to kind of chime in, Brendon?
Well, that's fascinating to hear, dude, and just being able to listen to your experience. Again, just thank you so much for sharing, and I'm glad that you've been able to witness what you have, just to be able to bring it back to the discussion. And there was like one thing I was going to mention relative to the abduction phenomena and everything like that, which is almost like an entire podcast in itself. How like the abduction phenomena, like sometimes it's more, again, it's kind of like this like interdimensional abduction, so to speak. But the abduction phenomena does really kind of like dive into another layer of this, especially when you start getting into this idea of, like, okay, like some of these interdimensional beings, like are benevolent, and then some of them might be less benevolent and everything like that. And that's just kind of like, I guess in some ways, kind of like the reality that we have to sort of deal with. And I'm not sure if you have anything related to that, just to be able to help people kind of like ground into this idea of, like, do we need to be quote unquote scared of the aliens being abducted and stuff like that? But the other thing that I was going to mention is that this was mentioned in the CE5 documentary, how the government has literally admitted to the idea that they've actually staged abductions. Like, they've actually orchestrated some of the abductions in order to be able to plant this idea of like the fearful agenda related to the aliens, to be able to further move forward their narrative. Like, they literally did this, like, back in like the years and years and years ago. And I don't know all the details. Like, did they literally have their own UFOs and pick people up and dress up like aliens or something like this? I don't know all the details, but they were part of the, again, it's kind of like this like psyops agenda to be able to paint this picture. But maybe based on your perspective, because again, we do have this understanding that, yeah, like there's different species, there's different races, there's different civilizations, and they're all kind of interacting. And yes, they're all consciousness. Some of them might have like their own agendas and stuff like that. Is there some sort of way that you can sort of help us discern this? Because again, like I just can imagine that for some people, approaching this topic can get scary. Like, it gets to a certain point where they're just like, I don't want to get abducted. Like, I don't want to get like, like talk to some weird aliens and stuff like that. So again, I don't really know all the answers to this too, but this is where even just kind of being able to prepare, if someone's just like, well, what do we do? Like, how do we, like, what about abduction? Because abduction is kind of like this very like fearful side related within the spectrum of this conversation. And I was just going to say, shout out to those of you listening on Kelly's live stream right now on TikTok right now. If you guys jump over to the Mystic Spider-Man profile, the link's there to jump over to YouTube. But either way, thanks for joining in. Like, Kelly's on TikTok right now. There's a bunch of comments in the TikTok, so thank you for those of you in the TikTok comments. And if you guys want to jump over to YouTube, go to Mystic Spider-Man's profile and join in, I guess, or Kelly will help you get there. But anyways, Neil, and yeah, maybe this and some closing thoughts. Like, yeah, like generally, what are your thoughts on, I guess, the abduction aspect related to the UFO thing? Is that something we need to be worried about? What do we need to know about it, and how can we kind of approach it from this like heart-centered space to be able to help like move the narrative forward in a way that will be like inviting and also inspirational for people, opposed to just the fearful side of it? So, any thoughts?
Yeah. honestly, it goes so deep that the only way to convey this properly is through a presentation that I would have to think about in order to do it, because there's always the risk of skipping something and not giving the full picture. You know, there seems to be all types of agendas going on. There's a lot of evidence to suggest there's a hybridization program, meaning hybridization of human DNA with other extraterrestrial DNA, not only happening by, you know, governing entities and secret governments, but also happening with ETs. There's a lot of evidence to suggest, and this is now documented. Before I would say this, and we will say just a channeler said it, but now there is information and documents about mantis beings involved in hybridization program. However, the mantis beings involved in it were actually benevolent, and the mantis beings that exist in our galaxy are actually some of the wisest, you know, higher dimensional beings that actually have a positive agenda and a positive intention for humanity. But then there's stories about gray extraterrestrials, but there's not just one race of gray aliens. The Prism of Lyra, for example, which you can download online for free and read it in 3 hours, will tell you about different types of gray races and how some gray races are actually extremely tall and actually white in color and live under our Earth. And some of them are robots, some of them are robots AI, some of them are sentient beings that have no feeling with emotion that are connected to our government and working for them. Some of them are working for negative reptilian races. Some of them have their own agenda because their planet and their existence has come to a halt and they can't evolve or ascend without the emotional component. What we have here on Earth, that many beings are coming to our Earth right now to ascend. Even Syrians and even Essassani and even some Palladians. You know, there's thousands of Palladian races, but some of them are coming here because the code of their ascension is literally locked in our DNA, and they, by us ascending, they're able to ascend too. And the reason why is that we exist in such a, you know, we exist in the first, second, and third dimension. We're not just in the third. We have first dimension and second dimension currently coexist with those other two dimensions, and with that other dimension. And since we exist in that reality, um, we're able to have much more of a full experience of emotions, from the utmost love and compassion to the darkest hate and lust and anger. And having that range of emotion gives a tool, it seems, to for many beings to ascend. So there's some great extraterrestrials that they are not able to ascend to another experience of existence and get out of their mundane reality without utilizing the DNA of humans to create a hybrid that they can incarnate themselves into and transfer their consciousness into, so that they can therefore have these experiences of ascension as well and go into higher dimensions. Some of these races, the Tiari, the Yael, which are supposed to be one of the first races that we actually have open contact with, and the Yael is supposed to be a race that we're actually going to be the ones that teach us space travel, give us the technology of space travel, and they are going to be our direct ancestors that are literally half human, half like us, and half gray alien, that are going to basically come down here in the future. Many people have said this. Um, so the hybridization program is extensive. Now let's talk about the hybridization in regards to not hybridization, but the abduction experience in regards to government abductions. There's something called screen memories. Um, there is actually I forget the project name, but you can find the project on the CIA's website where they actually worked on this. And for at least 100 years now, they've been abducted children and attempting to get psychic abilities out of them by trauma, by splitting their personalities, by giving them types of substances. You know, the Nazis were doing that in Germany, and then through Project Paperclip, the project continued over here in the U.S. And they were attempting um, to abduct these being people and then have them in these programs. But on some of these projects, you know, more recently, they actually did it in a form of an abduction experience where these people didn't know that they were part of these programs, but they would abduct them like ETs, give them screen memories so that they would think it was something else, or that they would think it's some sort of dream, and then they would still work on them and experiment on them and see about, you know, how this person is tapped into their psychic abilities, right? So there's a lot going on right now. I don't even know if we're gonna ever know the full extent of it all, right? But there's definitely outlets out there where you can learn a lot of this stuff. But there's also this disinformation campaign. A lot of this stuff has been infiltrated. There's a lot of disinformation out there. There's people in this community, especially, we want to believe, we want to know, you know, that's this, we want validation that this world is so much more than just the mundane of that. We see it, we live, die, we're a bunch of neural networks and chemical and molecules chaotically colliding until we die. We want that so much that we believe a lot of things that may actually be put out there in order to move us away from the truth. So when it comes to abductions, the MK Ultra program, a lot of it has been hijacked, but there are also ETs, and my wife actually is one of the experiencers, right? There's abductee, contactee, and experiencer. They all mean the same thing. Abductee is the negative connotation to it. I've been taken from my reality. I've been abducted from it. I did not consent to this. The contactee is someone that is more of a positive experience. I've been contacted by these beings. The experiencer is the neutral term, that you are, whether you're an experienced abductee, a contactee, you're an experiencer, you've experienced these things with these beings. But then there are other credible people like Dolores Cannon through hypnosis, and Barbara Lamb. Both, Dolores was a good friend of mine, and Barbara Lamb is, and we do events. We've done events with both of them that say that actually, even though you've had this negative experience of abduction, it was actually a soul contract you had before you came here. So what is the whole purpose of, if it's good or bad in the first place? Maybe the good and bad that we perceive it as is the fact that we have this amnesia, that we don't remember our soul contracts, we don't remember what we did before we came here, we don't remember our past lives on other worlds. Now we're being abducted, and we're like, wait a second, you're violating me, I've been abducted. And when you have these memories come back to you through hypnosis, you get angry. And I've been in abduction support groups. This is a real thing, abduction support groups all over the US, and Barbara Lamb and Yvonne Smith lead the biggest ones. And in these support groups, there's people that are depressed, people on drugs, and it's because they've been abducted, and they're trying to figure out how to explain it to people, and how to, no, not explain it to people, how to come to terms with their negative abduction experience. But then these same people, Barbara Lamb, Yvonne Smith, and more, Dolores Cannon and more, hypnotize these people, regress them, and then they find this voice inside their head that's not their voice, saying that, oh, actually, I chose to have that abduction experience because it gave me this trauma that then led to these experiences that I was supposed to have in this world, so that I could have this outcome, right? So what is good and what is bad, the jury's out. Like, if the abduction experience is negative to you just because you got taken from your reality and you didn't choose it right here and now, who's to say that before you came here, your soul didn't decide that you wanted it? I feel ultimately that everything that happens to us happens the way it's supposed to happen, whether it gives us a negative experience or a positive experience, whether we become a bad person from it or a good person from it. You can't have one without the other. You don't know the meaning of light without knowing the meaning of darkness. That's the contrast we came here from. We came here from pure light. So we came here from pure light to do what? To experience more light? But I feel maybe not. Maybe that's the eventual goal, but maybe it was to experience the struggle, the depth, the heaviness, the density of this reality, so that we could learn and appreciate the beauty of the light. And the paradox is, the light and the darkness, not one thing is better than the other when you look at it from that level. Because there's stories and stories that after you go back to the light, what do you want then? You want to go back to the darkness and do it all over again, right? It's just a circle of existence, it seems. And we keep going through these experiences. So a lot of people are out there actually assisting people in getting over this victimhood mentality of I've been abducted, and trying to see the lesson. And case in point, Travis Walton, who's another person I work closely with and was at my conference last year, he used to be very negative about his experiences. And like, you think like people think he just wanted to get famous from what he said. Man, he hated the fact that he got abducted and all the experiences. It ruined his life. He was really upset about it all. And now he's still like, damn, that ruined my life. Me telling everybody really ruined my life. But at my conference last year, the first time he actually said this, like publicly, when somebody asked him, well, was it bad? And he goes, I used to think that it was a bad experience, but now I know I wouldn't have evolved spiritually if it wasn't for it. People go decades talking about how much that sucked. And then all of a sudden they realize that, wait a second, because I had that experience, it's led me to this path. And look how many other people I've assisted and helped awaken. And that's what a lot of people are coming to terms with now. And I'll just add this. This month, I'm actually doing a free webinar with Grant Cameron, who's a really great UFO researcher, Ray Hernandez, who is one of the best researchers in regards to experiencers and contactees and abductions, and has actually done a survey with hundreds of thousands of people worldwide that have had abduction experiences, where he's now got a consensus on the types of experiences and beings and many other questions that these people have had. Kathleen Martin, who's another experiencer, and Alan Steinfeld on June 18th. So we're doing a UFO disclosure / experiencer panel. And I think it's important to do that now, because there's two things that actually kind of hit the sidelines when COVID happened. And it was the UFO thing. Like, until the Pentagon stuff came out, it was pretty much dead. But before that, we were like on one with it. And the other thing was like the legalization of psychedelics and cannabis worldwide. That was like hardcore, like on its way up. But then all of a sudden COVID happened and it shut down. So what I'm doing this month is we don't need to talk about Corona all day, right? So I'm going to do some events on UFO disclosure, give people some updates what's happening on June 18th. And then also we're going to do some events, spontaneous events on Portal to Ascension YouTube over the next month on what's happening with legalization bills for magic mushrooms and ayahuasca and different things in the United States.
Awesome. Thank you. Neil, can you just post a link for the best place that people can connect to? Post that into the Zoom chat, and then we'll copy it over. So
let me just say that best thing to do is go to our website, portaltoascension.org, sign up there, get signed up to the newsletter, see our events. We do 110 events plus a year. We have an event. This whole month is dedicated to hardcore disclosure. This week, I'm doing a channeling event on Saturday with Sari and Michael White. On Sunday, I'm doing Scriptures, Prophecies, ETs, and Atlantis with Billy Carson. The following week, I'm doing a 2-day weekend retreat with a whistleblower from the Air Force called Emery Smith, where it's about disclosure and advanced technology he worked with in the secret space program. And then after that, the next weekend, Ascension, Exopolitics, and Disclosure online conference with Laura Eisenhower, Michael Sala, John D'Souza, and myself. And it's all about what we started like the conversation with when I got here. What does Ascension have to do with disclosure? That's basically the topic of the whole event. It's going to be a 10-hour online conference. So if you want to check it out, go to portaltoascension.org and join us.
That's awesome, Neil. And as we just kind of get closer to wrapping up this broadcast, let's just kind of like go around once with just some closing thoughts. So can you just maybe just give us some closing thoughts again, just kind of like what do people need to keep in mind moving forward from here, whether they're trying to personally evolve this relationship with this kind of like higher advanced civilization stuff that's out there? What do they need to keep in mind? Also, I mean, again, I'm kind of approaching this from are there certain things that we need to keep in mind in order to be able to keep ourselves safe when we're approaching this topic? Because again, I think depending on the narrative that you've been told and the stories that you've been listening to, again, it's just like obviously discernment is a certain thing, but again, like how do we make sure that we're approaching this in a mindful, intelligent, balanced way that will also be able to make sure that, again, the people who are doing this are doing it in a way that's making sure that no one's getting hurt.
What we got to know is divide and conquer is the name of the game. Basically dividing people on different sides. I went to a 10-day silent meditation retreat and I was completely in silence. And on the 9th day, I was having this like existential crisis over the division within the UFO community. Because I work with so many people and there's like all this crazy drama all the time. It's pretty intense. And so I literally drew a graph of all the different factions of the UFO community and how it's all been split in the divide and conquer. And I have it like in a book, like this crazy mad scientist kind of drawing. And so what we need to focus on is the fact that anything that divides us just moves us away from the eventual goal, right? The one thing that we have that, they, if you want to call them they, ultimately it's not they anyway, they're just playing their role as well. But the one thing that we have that whatever is being pushed out by these elites is we have the energy of inclusion. They have the energy of exclusion, that they want this secret for themselves. What is the secret? What did all these people know for so long? The secret that they had that they utilized, whether it was sacred geometry or whatever, gave them the power that they have now. So we need to remember that the energy of inclusion is what we have with us. Anything that drives you away from, maybe you don't have the same opinion as someone, doesn't mean you need to hate that person or say that person is a shill or a controlled opposition, because that is what people get all the time. Many of these speakers, like some that I mentioned here, many other ones that I've worked with and ones that I haven't, are just people with their own experiences and their own intentions and even their own agenda. It doesn't have to be an agenda given by an elite. Maybe they've had a trauma in their life and they feel that, the disclosure of ETs is an answer to that trauma. Whether these people, for example, many people are utilizing this whole ET thing to say that child sex trafficking rings are coming down, right? And that's based on their traumas and their own experience of the fact that they've always been against this and really like angry about what's been happening on this level with Epstein and other people. So they're jump onto this has got to be the one way. But there are so many different possibilities, and unless you truly know, or unless you're like the first person to get contact with the ETs that disseminates all information everywhere, there's always a doubt whether it's real or not. So keeping an open mind, keeping an open heart, and not closing yourself off to someone else's beliefs or pushing them away because you think that they believe something else in regards to the disclosure of extraterrestrials, that's only going to move us further away from the world we want to create. So I would say that we would have to definitely keep our intentions pure and be open to everybody. And the other thing is, the main part is, we're not going to have disclosure unless we do the inner work. Don't think that we can just go ahead and not work on ourselves now and just meditate or wait for a day ETs come and solve anything. That's not going to happen. We need to work on ourselves. And how do we work on ourselves is we're transparent with who we are and how we got to where we are and what traumas we have and how we can release them. We are vulnerable and to take care of ourselves, and therefore we can take care of others. We find ways to love ourselves. And what does that mean? Not like, I love myself for the fact that I'm a great guy and have a great job and I have a great wife and family. How do you love yourself for the simple fact that you are? How do you love yourself for the simple fact that you exist? Right? That's hard for people. It's not about identifying with something, and because you identify with that, now you can love yourself. Figure out tools, find tools that, Brendon talks about a lot of the stuff, the meditations that he does, sound frequency, counseling, therapy, ayahuasca, which is like the best. I love it. Like that's like one that will take you there for sure, right? And so all these things are there available to you and been gifted to you by planet Earth, the mother that like birthed you here, in order for you to have the ability to transcend and create that collective reality so that we can have full disclosure. But until we get to that point, there's not going to be disclosure. So that's what I have to say right there. Just work on ourselves and don't be harsh with yourself. Don't be angry with yourself. For years, I was working on myself, 10 years, but I hated myself because I could never get to the point that I thought I was possible. I wanted to be somewhere and I could never be there. And I didn't know how to get there. And I started hating myself for it. Be gentle with yourself. Allow yourself to get to that place in your own timing. Just stay pure with yourself and your heart. Shed love, and we'll all eventually get there, because disclosure and full disclosure is inevitable. Like, this is going to happen. We're going to have open contact. This is real. It's been proven now. So it's only a matter of time. And how long it takes us to get there is entirely up to us.
Beautiful. Awesome, man. And honestly, I mean, a part of me wants to just keep going, but obviously we are going to just kind of like shift things and move things along. But again, I think there's a lot of ways to be able to see this, but I encourage people to be able to see it from a place of excitement and a place of just being, again, able to kind of like understand that, yes, there is this bigger story that's unfolding. And again, the way that I see this story unfolding is kind of from this higher perspective, that even this is still kind of unfolding within this like divine purpose. And it's for our growth. It's for our evolution of consciousness. We may not know all of the things that are going to happen, but at the very least, as the veil continues to get pulled back, I think it will reveal to us the idea that this reality that we are in is undeniably incredibly magical, and that we are a direct part of that magic. So that's where, again, like, approach this in the way that you wish. Like, if it's something that you just want to put on the shelf and kind of just focus on other stuff, that's okay. But for some of us, we're going to be sitting outside, meditating, and just being able to see, like, if this is an experience you choose to welcome for yourself. And there's no guarantee. I don't know exactly how it works. You could literally meditate. You could literally be sitting out there for like a month straight and maybe nothing will show up. And then somebody else might do it once and it might show up. Even then, was that a part of your quote unquote soul contract? I don't know. So it's kind of like, are we even manifesting this, or are we just kind of aligning with the futures that are already there? And then it's just when we want to align with those realities. But again, I think when it comes to the CE5, again, the intention is very, very important. And this is even something that talks about in the documentary, where you might get like someone who's kind of very much in their egoic mindset, and they're like, oh yeah, like, show me them UFOs, let's do it. They're there for like the entertainment, almost like the superficial aspect of it. The UFOs might just be like, no, like, that's not for you. Like, we're not just here to, like, we're not your puppet, we're not here to dance, we're not fireworks sort of thing, but for those of us who kind of like really show up and have done that inner work, who have done that personal that personal development, just to be able to kind of like really say that, what is the intention you bring into it? Are you doing it just to be fascinated? Are you doing it because that in being open to this experience, it will also open you to more of yourself? and it's within that experience that allows you to continue to show up even further within the ongoing work that you do, and the message that you can share, and the fact that you can be an ambassador. I'm sure a lot of us would want to just be able to have an experience, just to be able to say like, okay, now it's no longer just a theory. And now, how can I convey this message further for other people? And again, how can I even be there to be, again, a friend and an ally for others as they start to open up to this experience? Because there will be experiences where it will be kind of something within your will, your initiation, so to speak. But then again, I think we will continue to see a lot of these experiences where people who are just like regular, just like Joe Schmo, like automatons in the Matrix. And I'm not saying that in a negative way or anything like that, but it's going to happen where there's literally just going to be people who aren't existentially expanding their consciousness, who will start seeing these things in the sky. And so how do we allow ourselves to be able to show up, to be able to like hold space for them, and to be able to help them develop a little bit more context, and also to be able to see it as an opportunity for them to turn more into the place in their own heart. So I mean, there's a lot happening here within this story, and I think it's important for you to be aware of where you're putting your focus on. If you're just like, oh, there's so many negative ETs and they're all just like trying to, like crossbreed and they're trying to control, and the reptilians and the draconians and the this and the that and this and that and this and that, like you can be aware of it. It's all information. Like it's up to you. It's really where you focus. I mean, it's the same with the world. There's a lot of stuff happening in the world that's not too great, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff happening that's really, really beautiful. And so I think for me personally, I think it's okay to be aware of the many spectrums of the UFO phenomena and what it really opens up to, and this idea that there are, like beings that have their own will, and it's kind of playing out and everything like that, still within the divine conscious order, so to speak, which allows us to drop into that place of deep trust. But at the same time, I choose to approach this from a place of excitement and a place of healing and a place of expansion and a place of consciousness, and a place that I feel is something that in a lot of ways I've kind of it feels very natural. It's just like, and I'm sure for a lot of us here, it's just like, yeah, I'm pretty sure I've been preparing my whole life for this moment. I'm pretty sure like this is actually like what we've been kind of leading up to. And that's where, again, even with what we were talking about earlier, I believe it was Rachel, where if it was Rachel or otherwise, but again, this experience when you have an experience, be it even just in your dreams or physically with something in the sky or even an orb in your room or the corner of your vision, I think there's kind of like this feeling that really feels like almost like a sense of home. Like home is kind of like one of the words that we can use to describe it. It's like this like reunion with a part of yourself, and again, I think that's a very, very powerful thing. So again, let us be aware of the full spectrum. Sure, that's cool, that's important. Again, like because this is an interesting thing, right? And we don't have to get into this now. Like there is shadow work within the UFO phenomena concept as well, in the same way there's shadow work within every aspect of spirituality as well. So even within the UFO phenomena, there is healing that is taking place. And what role do we have within that healing? Let's focus on developing healthy relationship with that concept, with those experiences, with the relationships that we are building in the future. So what's going to happen in the future? I don't know exactly. How will this unfold in 5-10 years from now? We'll wait and see. Things may open up. There may be some like very, very visceral experiences that may kind of take place on this level, on this dimensional plane. And know that we are infinitely flexible, and as long as we are in our heart space, we will allow ourselves to show up in a place in the best way possible for whatever is needed. And I think right now, again, we can just kind of like begin preparing for it, while at the same time, for those who feel ready, starting to kind of like even welcome in some of those experiences here and now. So let's start passing the talking stick around. I'm going to pass it over to Kris next. Let me just double check. Okay, is it just... Okay, I think Neil had to hop off, so it's Kelly, Kris, and Rachel who are still here. So we'll pass it over to Kris, and then Kelly and Rachel, we can get some closing thoughts, and we'll finish it off with a little meditation for those of you who are still tuned in. So Kris, go right ahead, dude.
Yeah, so like again, like I'm just like so excited to like like share some of my perspectives, because of like I just feel like so much of like what Neil like is like talking about and bringing up, like it's like it's all these like these light bulbs that like like turn on in my head, because like I don't know, I'm someone who like just from like such a young age, like I feel like I dove like so deep into all of this stuff, like, you know, where it's kind of like so much of that stuff wasn't really fully integrated, where, you know, like I dove down all these rabbit holes and staying up to like, you know, 5 in the morning, because I like have always been so interested in like, you know, like esoteric information and stuff like that, and really just like, you know, diving deep into it. And kind of like, you know, as time goes on, I realized that it's kind of like some of those aspects that were maybe like, you know, incomplete, like, you know, like kind of like you know, like in my like in more recent times, like, you know, like I've kind of like you know, it's like the little those like breadcrumbs have kind of like you know, led me to kind of like the deeper understanding, you know, like that maybe it was fragmented then, but then like, you know, it comes into a clearer picture, you know, today. So it's kind of like some information I uncovered, like, you know, comes into greater awareness. And like, you know, it's always so interesting how that like happens within life all the time. But I don't mean to get so off topic in talking about that. But what I wanted to mention specifically that like, you know, like Neil was like bringing up actually was like the, and I'm not going to go like too deep into this because we are kind of closing up and stuff. I know that this kind of just like you know, opens up like a whole new doorway to just like, you know, more conversation, stuff like that. But when he was mentioning like the idea of like, you know, like the Zeta race, and even like, you know, the Essenani race, like the Essenani race is actually like, you know, the race that like, you know, like Bashar that he was talking about, like, you know, works with and like channels. And the Essenani is basically like a hybrid of like, you know, like human and Zeta, like the Zeta reticuli species, like combined with like, you know, human DNA. And it was like actually like, you know, like it's kind of like, you know, we look at that and we're just like, why did we like contribute our DNA to help like, you know, like the Zeta race? And it's actually like, it's so interesting. And the reason why I even know like a lot of this stuff is because I read the book. I have the book, The Prism of Lyra, that Neil was talking about. And like, you know, like in reading with like, you know, these galactic heritage cards and stuff, like, you know, it details so much information about this, but it's like it presents it in a way that's like so relative to what's going on in our world right now. So like, you know, so for example, like, you know, one of the cards in this deck is survival fears, and it's related to the Zeta reticuli, and it has to do with, you know, in the ancient days of the Zeta reticuli, their species nearly destroyed themselves due to high planetary toxicity and misuse of technology. So like when they realized that their species was dying, they experienced the most primal of fears, that of no longer continuing as a species. These survival fears force them to look deeply within and make drastic changes. And it's like, you know, the same is true in our lives. Often we don't make changes until we can clearly see that our old ways will only destroy us. By then we have little chance of change. What part of your life needs to be changed? And it's just kind of like, you know, it was the Zeta species that were originally from the Vega colonies. You know, like if you're looking at it from this idea of like, you know, like original like unity to kind of like fragmentation, it was kind of like, you know, that the Zeta like species kind of descended from the Vega colonies, which, you know, like the Vega species like descended from the original constellation of Lyra. So, you know, like the book that another book that she has that Lissa Royal wrote is the cradle of Lyra. And, you know, it's kind of like that this was the birthplace of like, you know, like all of these civilizations, and that everything kind of fractaled out like outside of the prism of Lyra, where, you know, like all of these kind of species kind of like came from and stuff like that. But anyway, it's kind of like it's dealing with like this idea that the to make like a long short story short, and coming back to the idea of like, you know, like the Zeta species, like in particular, it was basically that they lost touch with their spirituality, and they got like so distracted by technology and ignored the needs of their planet. And so their planet became toxic. And, you know, basically like the same potential exists for us, like, you know, on this planet to take the same path. And it's like, you know, so it's the idea that you know, their planet became so toxic that they had to live underground. And that's what like Neil was kind of mentioning and talking about. So their bodies began to change because of it. So they tried to fix the situation with genetic engineering, such as removing emotional expression. And so like that is like, you know, like what ended up turning into the Zeta reticuli species. So basically um, you know, like when people talk about abductions and stuff like that, it was actually like some of these like abductions and stuff like that actually had to do with the purpose of saving their species. So it was the idea that um it was the idea that like I'm trying to like explain it. It was the idea that like we basically helped them to like heal the emotional aspect that they had lost touch with, because they had descended so far into just basically like completely being absorbed within the idea of technology and losing touch with spirit. So like that those like some of those abduction experiences actually had to do with like us helping them like to repair their civilization, and like, you know, like when they were nearly at the stage of like complete collapse, which is why they're actually helping us today. And one of the cards later on in the deck, you know, like as it goes like further on, is the card of like returning the favor. And it's the idea that like that's why these species are actually here like helping and assisting us, is because we actually helped and assisted them in their own ascension process and stuff like that. So it's kind of like that's the idea that like why there's like some of these like extraterrestrial like races and stuff like that that are here now on Earth that are like helping us. And like, you know, like the reason why I feel so strongly connected with them too is just because like when I like first got this deck of cards, it was like I felt like I did the first reading, it was like the entire reading that I did was like related to the Zeta species, and it was like related that I have that like, you know, connection with them. So it's like, you know, a very like personal contact experience that's kind of like not in a physical way of seeing like a light ship or anything like that, but like feeling like their connection like to me and stuff like that, and like recognizing that it's kind of like, you know, they're here to kind of like help and support me through kind of like, you know, like, I mean, just like, you know, through my life and stuff like that. But it's just interesting how, you know, like there's these like levels of kind of like, you know, like, and how this like deck, like, you know, uses it. It's just like, you know, in terms of like rejecting emotion and like, you know, like, when we feel disconnected from like, you know, those around us and not embracing, you know, like the positive and the negative as like valid as part of being human, like, you know, like being able to embrace all aspects of emotion, you know, even like the harder aspects of it. So like, yeah, I'm not going to go too much further, but you know, like what I wanted to, I guess, just get at by explaining some of that, and like was just the idea like in of itself that it's kind of like the lessons that these kind of like stories have to tell us like are relative to, you know, like our human story that is going on right now. And it's not only relative, but it's kind of like, you know, it interpenetrates like our story, because it's kind of like all of these experiences like have like with these other races are not out there, but it's like stuff that has happened, and like they play a vital role in our transformation, even if we don't really recognize it and recognize it. So it's kind of like, you know, like these like stories that are illustrated in these cards, like, you know, are all about how, like, I think that planetarily we're kind of like all experiencing these kind of like survival fears in one way or another, with like, you know, kind of like being on the brink of having like all of these like crazy technologies and stuff like that. And even with like, you know, thinking about when the nuclear bomb came into like existence and stuff like that, you know, just having all of this technology and like being on the brink of like, you know, kind of like extinction, and kind of like being like, you know, always needing to come back to that spiritual component of kind of like, you know, not letting like technology get out of our hands and letting us like kind of spiral into that kind of like of rejecting tuning into ourself and losing that spiritual component. So like, you know, even with going, I'm not going to talk for too much longer, but going off of the last thing that you were saying though too, about how like, you know, like that kind of discord and disharmony can like exist within even these communities and stuff like that that are having contact with these beings and stuff like that, or within the UFO community and stuff like that. It's just that it always comes back down to like, as much as we want to advance like technologically, it's kind of like we need to kind of like mirror that with our spiritual development and not let that like get out of hand. Because it's kind of like, you know, when we think about just development in general, like that's what we think about. It's kind of like, you know, more like sometimes like, you know, we think about it in terms of like more material infrastructure and more things that we're like building physically. But it's kind of like, as much as we build things physically, we need to still be building that internal like spiritual foundation, which is like, you know, at the core of, I feel like, you know, what all these teachings always lend itself back to is that like, you know, it's like not getting so caught up in the material, but like recognizing that like, you know, we are not those things, and not this, even this body, but, you know, like we're really like building our energetic body, and like, you know, building our capacity for emotion and compassion and all of that, like alongside all of these technological advancements and stuff like that. So like, we can always get so wrapped up in all of those aspects of like contact and things that are outside of us, but it always comes back to the work that needs to be done within. So like, I guess that those are kind of my closing words too, is that it's just kind of like, you know, like what all of these kind of like things lead back to. And, you know, even this deck of cards that I work with is that, you know, it's like I get excited about kind of learning about, you know, the different aspects and stuff like that that I can look at in terms of like a physical story and that like that's evolving. But like what the cards really like are teach, like they teach me is like, you know, like they're relative to these aspects that need to be healed about like integrating all aspects of self, like, like, and it's being able to become a more compassionate, like, loving human being. And like that, the lessons, it always comes back to that, like, inner work that needs to be done for that inner transformation that we can do within ourselves, so then we can kind of reflect that outwardly to the world around us, and build and create a world that is, in love, that is in union, and in like accepting the oneness that exists, like, within everyone and everything. So yeah, those are my closing words.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kris. And yeah, thank you for just like sharing your wisdom and insight from that. Like, I love the idea that like you've already invested a lot of time just like studying the dynamics of this cosmic civilization story. And I mean, that's the thing, like there's people who've been quite dedicated to this, and the information's come from, like channeling sources and ancient history and, mediums and everything like that. And I think together, once we really understand that, like, okay, yeah, aliens are real, this is a thing, and they have a history, they have a story, they have like their own kind of existence, and we are intimately connected to that. And again, like their history may be our history as well. And so again, is kind of things that have already been talked about, and I'll just mention a couple things real quick. Is like, yeah, it's very likely that what we identify as us being humans, like, did not originate here on Earth. This idea of like even like this human vehicle, this vessel, could very easily have been something that came from somewhere else, and then it kind of got put here, and then it kind of got adjusted and modified and tweaked and everything like that. But I think it's quite fascinating just to be able to, again, kind of be open to the idea that within each of us, there is kind of like this story of something that we are personally connected to within our DNA, and this is where, again, you kind of like get into like the more kind of like the tangible aspects of the idea that each one of us is kind of like a star seed. Each one of us, like, we have an ancestry physically within, like our grandparents and things like that, but then also we kind of have like a lineage, like cosmically, within like our DNA and our soul and our spirit and things like that. So and I'm mentioning that because it brought me back to this idea where, again, just kind of bringing things into conclusion and just kind of painting the picture here, and I'll pass it to Kelly and Rachel as well. I think, again, with what's happening right here, it's acknowledging the fact that like there are many races, there are many different players happening within this play, so to speak. And the government is trying to suppress this. They don't want us to know about this, because if they do, again, it kind of like opens us up to this bigger picture, which can lead us back to our power. But we are bypassing them. We are literally bypassing them through the personal work that we are doing. And so when it comes to, again, like this idea of like human initiated contact, CE5, as we're calling it, the Close Encounter 5 protocol, I think one of the intentions that we can kind of hold with us is this idea of being able to put forth this intention of listening, understanding that like these other people that we're interacting with, like, look to them as elders, look to them as like a mystic, look to them as a teacher. They have something to share with you. What would you like to share with me? And I think if we like, and I'm just kind of formulating this, I'm like, okay, that, like, I can see that, right? I can actually see that being something valuable to kind of carry into our meditation. So opposed to just being, hey, let's go sit outside, meditate, and hope that lights show up, let's kind of like do that and just be like, I am here to listen. What do you have to share with me? I think that actually, and again, as I'm saying that, I'm like, yeah, like that makes sense. Like that's because that's what they want, right? Like they're not just here to just entertain us. They're like, yo, like, help us help you, help us help you, help the collective help us type thing. So what message do they have to share with us? And that message may be the experience in itself. And then at the same time, we haven't fully touched upon this, but it was mentioned, where the idea that again, telepathic communication with these ships, with these light beings, is a part of the experience. And obviously with what's happening in the world right now, again, what is also a part of the story is the idea that we are literally like tapping into our spiritual superpowers, our what I refer to as the cities, Siddhis, cities, which is like the ancient kind of Sanskrit term that refers to like these additional extra abilities, such as like teleportation, bilocation, telepathy, like levitation, things like that, walking through objects and things, which come as a result of like shifting one's consciousness and kind of awakening within the dream. It's much in the same way that when you go lucid in a dream, you can kind of like bend the spoon, so to speak. In the same way, we can actually start to do this here. And maybe that's something that the light beings and the other people and everything like that, maybe that's something they might be able to teach us about. Maybe that's something they can assist us about. Maybe that's something they can actually help kind of begin to like activate within us. One of the things that I've actually heard about, and this was also in the CE5 documentary, is like encounters with these beings spontaneously healing people. You know, like there was one story of a guy who had like problems with his hearing, and then he had this encounter, and then he asked them, he's like, can you help me with this? And then they actually did, and then his hearing was fixed by this or something like that. So I mean, again, I don't know exactly, but I'm just kind of, what I'm doing is I'm kind of listening to my heart, and I'm trying to think of things from a bigger picture of why are these encounters important? And I can see this kind of playing out in this way where the experience of them is an opportunity for us to be able to be present with it as a student. And then in a way to be able to also kind of like activate something within us, whether that be literally or more just metaphorically. It activates inspiration. It activates kind of like a presence, an idea. Could it also activate something else? I don't know, but I do know that these extra additional abilities are possible. But at the same time, I will just mention this. I think with whatever we're doing, I think it's important that we're not kind of like approaching it from this place of like putting our power to something outside of us, where it's like, oh, please help me sort of thing, like you're begging them type thing. Like I don't think that's quite how it should be. I think it's just kind of something where it's like, yo, like I'm already freaking powerful, but hey, if there's like stuff you want to, you know, like how can we interface here? And it really, again, once you kind of start diving into this, it really starts to allow you to expand your understanding of yourself, where it's like, whoa, like who am I? And why is this relationship something that I'm experiencing right now? And then this is where, again, you know, like I think this is where like the starseed concept really starts to kind of like actually become something that's, you know, very much a part of all of our stories. And it's something that, again, even just as I'm diving into this, you know, some of you heard me talk before, I've always kind of had this very discerning kind of, not resistance to the starseed idea, but I've always been very gentle with how I've held it. Because I know it's a very exciting idea, and I see some people and they grab it very, very tightly, and they're just like, this is my identity, this gives me purpose. But parallel to this, I'm also holding on to it because there's something within myself that I don't fully love, and therefore if I have this, it helps me kind of mask it, and it shifts the focus. Like I see some people do that, but at the same time, I think I'm starting to feel myself getting curious about the idea of just being like, yo, like if I'm capable of developing a relationship with these entities, beings, etc., then maybe it's through that relationship that I'll actually be able to receive more information about like my own, not only lineage, but also like my own story that will continue to inspire me. Where it's like, again, you know, like I know someone said this like way before. They're like, oh yeah, like you're probably like a part of like the Lyran civilization or something like that, and I'm just like, I'm like, maybe like I don't know, my voice, I'm a leader or something like that, like maybe, I don't know, maybe we've all got a bit of everything or something like that. But again, you know, for me, if someone were to say to me, hey, if you like sit outside in a field, meditate, work on yourself, drink, like, you know, eat good food, sleep well, exercise, you know, do all this other stuff, do your chakra meditations, tune in for morning meditations, then you will receive knowledge about your cosmic identity. If someone would literally say, if you do XYZ, then you will receive this, I'd be like, okay, I'll give it a shot. Because that's the only way that I'm kind of like open to this starseed idea, opposed to me just kind of like picking a narrative out of a book and just being like, ooh, I like this one. For me, in order to really be able to start identifying with that starseed, I am kind of like patiently waiting for an experience where something communicates it to me, and that could be through a dream, and it could be through an experience, it could be through like telepathy or something like that. I don't really know yet, but I can feel myself kind of being pulled towards something here, in a way that's actually quite exciting for me. You know, suddenly, like even after this broadcast, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna go outside and meditate under the stars and stuff like that. So Who knows? Who knows? But I think the fact is that each and every single one of us is incredibly beautiful, incredibly magic, more than what we thought we were, and we all have a very important role to play within this story. And I think each of us, our role is bigger than just this earth in itself. And yeah, let's just take things one step at a time. Stay grounded, stay curious, and keep an open heart. So. Pass it around. Kelly, Rachel, who wants to go next? Thank you guys for listening to me babble. Kelly, I'll pass it over to you. Go ahead, Kelly.
Yeah, so this has been wonderful. Definitely. The one thing that I have learned when having contact with one particular being or collective was the importance of cleaning up your messes.
Oh, hold on. I think Kelly's feed just froze there. So we'll just give it a second. If Kelly got abducted, then we just wish her well. So hopefully she'll be back in a second and she can tell us all about the experience she had. Rachel, can I pass it over to you? Jokes aside. And we'll pass it over to Kelly once she's back in here. So it's probably just a battery or something like that. Rachel, go ahead.
This has been such a wonderful discussion. I feel like I didn't know if I had. Oh, Kelly's back.
Kelly is back. Okay, Kelly is back from the sixth dimension. So, Kelly, go right ahead. We'll pass it back to you then.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, just one of the major things is when speaking to these beings or having an energetic exchange with them was the importance of cleaning up my messes. Being it any sort of karmatic messes that I had created, which is really doing that work. And that's 100% on point is really getting to it and getting those things out of the way that are taking up space that you can now hold more energetic frequencies and be able to connect better with these ships and entities. Another thing is it really seems like it is like a circular life lesson where we're all as above, so below, learning together through this process of ascension. These beings are all going through their own differing evolutionary processes, and they're learning from us as we are learning from them in every aspect. And that's where it brings into account that it's not necessarily a hierarchy, that they are higher dimensional beings. Even though we call them higher dimensional beings, they're not necessarily higher dimensional beings. They're just at a different place in time. So and going back to they are us, they are lineage. Our DNA skin suits are very important, as it has a lot of the codings and everything, and it's an evolutionary process, and holds our Akashic records of all the galactic histories. And as we awaken and get more light codings in, that's when we truly are able to activate that, and we'll be able to share that with them in a lot of different ways. So yeah, it's definitely one of those things that I believe, are always in our awareness if we allow them, if we just tap into it. And really just, it's about how we center ourselves. And one way that I was going to say to connect to them is when you start to heal your inner child and do inner child work, that's really a good way of being able to raise the vibrational frequency and being able to connect as well. I find that I really got in touch with my inner child, and my heart chakra opened, and I was really able to experience a consciousness state of being able to connect in a different way, and it was a different even signature frequency than my regular one. But so I think that really inner child work is very important, as well as the meditation, eating right is really, really important. And just taking it easy on yourself, because this ascension process is not necessarily a race. It's about really it's not about getting to the finish line. It's about the experiencing the whole process of it. And that doesn't mean necessarily to slack off, but taking it easy on yourself too, when, you know, don't be too hard if you don't feel like you're in the spot where you want to be. Um, because then you need the self-love, and that self-love is the catapult to being able to assist other people. So I think that that is all that I have. I definitely think that we're going to be seeing disclosure in the next couple of years, though. That's for sure. I mean, it's already happening, but in a broad spectrum, we're going to be able to see these UFO occurrences come about. Um, and it's just up to us as light workers on a mass level to really shift the consciousness to one where it's of the universal perspective, and that it is of unity, so that when this comes to this point, we will be seeing ourselves as a galactic family, and be able to connect in that way, instead of having people think of it as a hostile occurrence. So thank you.
Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Kelly, can you do me a favor and just post your direct YouTube URL into the chat? I just want to be able to make sure, because when you search Kelly the Lamb, a few of them show up, or Kelly Lamb, a few show up. But we'll make sure we include that into the show notes as well. So perfect. Thank you, Kelly. Awesome. Yeah, again, you know, like I think for those of us who really do kind of feel called towards this topic and the potentials of it, it calls us into our best self. And it requires like a level of maturity, a level of like spiritual maturity, a level of responsibility for our own being, where it's like, oh, what, like you want to be able to like get the keys to the universe and stuff like that, be like, okay, but like you got to work on yourself first. You got to kind of prepare yourself to be able to open up to this. And again, I know a lot of us have naturally already been doing this, and I think we're already kind of, many of us here are kind of in this place where like we have some sort of soul contract to be able to play some sort of role within this galactic shifting consciousness that is happening. And again, that's the idea, is that I think what's very fascinating is the idea that what is happening right now on Earth has the potential to ripple out into other parts of the cosmos. You know, like that idea in itself is a very, very powerful idea, where Earth is not this isolated event. And that's why like so many of the species and the races and the civilizations are paying attention to Earth. Like they are tuned in. You know, it's kind of like this cliche of like Earth is like a TV show for aliens and stuff like that. It's kind of like that. You know, like they are literally looking in on what is happening right now, because what is happening right now has the ability to kind of like ripple out through space and time. And again, maybe it's already happened or something like that. Again, Neil kind of mentioned this idea where it's like very Mobius strip, where it's like we are the future affecting the past, and it's our future self that affect the past, that affect the future. It's very trippy. It's very trippy. But again, so maybe we're just kind of playing this out for infinity, and if that's okay, then hey, that's okay. So all right, Rachel, we'll pass it over to you. And Kelly, thank you for putting the link in the, did you put it in the Zoom chat? In the Zoom chat. Okay, there it is. Perfect. All right, so I'll put it into the YouTube chat as well. So perfect. All right, thank you, Kelly. Kelly, was there any, just to confirm, because this is just gonna be last times around, was there any final closing words that you wanted to add just for all the people tuned in before we pass it over to Rachel? Just a message of inspiration.
Yeah, it's one thing that definitely, it's just about following your heart, and as you just activate in your intuition, this whole process is really just going against the grain, going against that programming inside of you that says to do things a specific way. It's about following your heart, really feeling it, and that's going to guide you the directional path in which you are going to be able to do this very simply. When you follow your heart, you're not going against your higher self. You begin to merge those together. So that's what I definitely, just following your heart, following your intuition, because there's going to be, roadblocks up ahead, but if you can walk through anything when you're following your heart, and you won't have fear, you'll be able to walk through it as an ascended master, and just be able to embody your actual multidimensional place on this planet.
Beautiful. Awesome, Kelly. Yeah. And again, I like this idea that like the entities, the inhabitants, the races, the other us's and stuff like that, like they're cheering us on, like they are there. They're like, you got this. we got this. So let's allow ourselves to just kind of like feel that, because I think that message, we feel it in our heart, we feel it when we're in meditation. So, and we see it through the synchronicities and stuff like that. I mean, that's a whole topic in itself. Like are the same inhabitants of these civilizations and UFOs, like, are they the ones messaging us through synchronicity as well? Like, are they the spirit guides as well? Are they the ancestors from both the past and the future as well? We'll talk about it more on another broadcast, I'm sure. Rachel, I'll pass it over to you if you would like to be able to bring some closing thoughts, and then we'll just end it with a brief closing meditation. So Rachel, when you're ready, go ahead.
I'm ready. Sorry, I was just
Not a problem.
in the YouTube chat there. Yeah, this has been such a wonderful discussion, and I guess I did remember the thought that I lost earlier that flew away from me. It was actually I was reminded of it when Kelly was talking, and I wrote it down, and I feel like it's come up a couple times since then even. But I just keep thinking the idea of our connection with each other, and in watching the CE5 documentary, just noticing that in all of their clips of trying to make contact in different ways, there was always a large group of people together, or not necessarily a large group, but like people together. It wasn't ever just like one person necessarily. I mean, yes, in the meditation aspect of things, but it just kind of got me thinking about the power of our connection with each other, and how important it is to not just cultivate ourselves, but again, like, it's come up, I think Neil might have mentioned it, and then a couple other times it came up, like the idea of connecting, and like getting spread out to make connections with other groups of people, and getting the word out there to others, but also not thinking, oh, like, it's all about like me making contact, but really it should be about like us as a group, like collectively, all of us as a whole, experiencing these things together, and even just in small groups. But for me personally, not that I want to get into the personal side of things, because that's exactly what I'm talking against, I feel like, where it is more like the bigger picture outside of just us ourselves. But I struggle with connecting with others, and feeling like, oh, I can put myself out there and make a connection, or like go join groups of people who are doing meditations and things like that. I just have this nervousness about that, but really that's like doing the work inside, and moving past that, and realizing like other people have those same fears about being in groups of people, and that's just normal, and if we all just come together, then everyone feels so much more loved and so much more comfortable, if we could break out of our own little individual bubbles, and connect with everyone else. And that was really just the thought that ran away. But also I did want to mention, since I mentioned my meditation experience earlier today out on the grass there, ever since I did that earlier today, I keep having this sensation of something tapping on the back of my head right here. And it was actually happening earlier during the broadcast, a couple times there. But it was just one of those things where I noticed it after I had done the meditation, and kind of thinking like, oh, that's an interesting sensation. That's like something is touching me here. And kind of thinking like, oh, I wonder who or what, or like whatever that might be, that is just like a little like love tap on my head like this afternoon. And actually during class too earlier, and it's been happening like on and off all afternoon since I did that meditation, and not earlier today. So I just thought that was interesting, and that you guys might find that fascinating too, that I did have that kind of interesting physical sensation of some kind of connection. But yeah, it was so wonderful to be here with everyone and to be part of this discussion. Thank you so much, Brendon, for facilitating as always, and so great to meet Neil, and Kelly and Lise and Kris. So great to be here with you again. Anyway, yes. Good night, all. Love you all so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Rachel. And absolutely beautiful notes, just to even be able to conclude on, where again, I think as Rachel was saying, it is about us. And so that's where, again, I think when we understand that the work that we do personally is the work for the collective, right? So if you feel called to go out and try doing some CE5, try initiating contact and things like that, I think if you're doing it from this very like altruistic place, in understanding that it's like, this is more than just my experience, this is a collective experience, this is something I can welcome, and this is something that I can like bring forth and share and, you know, incorporate as wisdom. So I think it's a very, very exciting time for us to be alive right now. And I think, again, you know, for those of you who are tuned into this broadcast, I think it's up to you to decide how you choose to carry this information, how you choose to hold it. And at the same time, I think this just goes hand in hand with just living a balanced life and just being aware and helping our neighbors and working on ourselves and expressing our creativity, and on the weekends summoning encounters with aliens. You know, maybe it'll just be that, where it just kind of becomes, this is the new norm of us making galactic contact or something like that. We'll see. But I think, again, just being able to have an open heart, a pure heart, an open mind is essential to the coming steps within the story. And again, just to be able to understand that as light guardians, as light workers, star seeds, shifters, whatever we call ourselves, there's an important role for us to play within the fact that as this information begins to surface, it will be up to us to be able to decide what narrative we are going to co-create together. And so let's focus on a narrative that will be one that will inspire us, that will nurture our spirits, that will open us up to more of the magic that is all around us and remind us of our potential within it and our unity between ourselves and all things. So thank you so much, everyone, for being a part of this conversation, and drop those 1111s in the chat if you enjoyed this. And again, for those of you who are looking, please feel free to connect with all the people who are on this broadcast. Their information will be in the YouTube show notes, and I'll post it into the comment here as well on YouTube, so you can check it out. And even just feel free to send them a message and be like, hey, I tuned into the UFO broadcast, and, you know, let them know. And yeah, just so much love to everybody, so much love to all the members of this community in all forms, just doing our thing and leveling up together. And again, just kind of wrapping this up, I encourage people, if they're looking for more, go check out the CE5 documentary. Again, you can find it, you can rent it online. It's available through Vimeo and other platforms. Highly encourage you to check it out and support it. So definitely, it's important information. And again, obviously, just kind of think for yourself, keep connecting the dots, stay curious, and yeah, just kind of keep working on whatever it is that you feel called to. So beautiful. All right. Okay. So with that said, let's just conclude this with a little meditation. And yeah, I'm definitely feeling called as we kind of move forward, where like, for myself as a facilitator, I do want to start facilitating additional meditations that are going to kind of like relate back into this theme of kind of cosmic coherence. And we did actually do a bit of that today during our Waking Up with Wolf broadcast, which was quite special. And a reminder for any of those here who aren't aware, we do our team meditations Monday to Friday at 10 a.m. And when we practice those, we're basically, again, kind of like practicing getting ready for the bigger aspects of the story that are unfolding as we speak. So let's take a moment here to just conclude this meditation. So just inviting everyone to gently just close your eyes. Just allow yourself to relax, straighten up your spine, relax your face. And as you listen to my voice, just gently begin to bring awareness to your breath. Gently, as you breathe here, just allowing yourself to be in this space of gratitude. Thank you for coming along on this adventure with us. It is my hope that it planted seeds and shifted your consciousness and expanded your mind in some form or another. And so thank you for being open to receiving it and carrying this with you further. So just taking a moment here as we conclude this meeting, to just visualize us in a circle here and gently imagine all of us standing up and coming together, and just take a moment here to visualize all of us in a group hug as we just take an opportunity to just be able to be in this space of coherence and just be able to reflect our gratitude back to one another. And just allow yourself to add a gentle sway to your body as you physically feel the sway of the group hug. and really just honoring the many levels and layers and dimensions of who we are as humans, as star seeds, as soul, as consciousness, as love. And so just take a moment here to just breathe. As you continue to breathe, again, just sending a message from your own heart to all the people who are here, saying words of kindness and inspiration, and just allowing yourself to receive any message back, words to support you. You are seen, you are heard, you are supported, you are loved. Gently imagine the group hug slowly releasing. Just take a moment here to give individual hugs, hug all the people, hug all your virtual friends, your cosmic friends. Beautiful. And slowly, as we keep this gratitude in our heart, we'll bring our awareness back to our physical body and gently wiggle your fingers and your toes and open your eyes and return your awareness to the space around you. Beautiful. Yeah, get some stretches in there if you need it. Awesome. All right. Thank you again, everyone, so much. I know I keep saying that, but it really means a lot just to be able to facilitate the sacred digital space and to have the support of the community and co-creating it. So thank you for making it what it is, just by being here and adding your presence, and again, allowing yourself to take what's happened here and continue to echo it out further into the wider community. So yeah, let's just keep doing what we're doing. Again, I think we're on the right path. I think there's a few additional things that have kind of opened up for us in terms of knowing that contact and these CE5 experiences are possible. And again, go out if you feel called to. The basic instructions: go outside, meditate, be in that heart space, allow yourself to be in that coherence, kind of like put out a signal to the universe and just be like, I am here. And just hold that intention, even that intention of just kind of like, I am here to listen, I am here to learn, I am here to develop that relationship, and then kind of like visualize, kind of like focusing in on where you are, kind of like give them a roadmap, so to speak. And yeah, report back and let us know if anything happens. And yeah, we'll go from there. So beautiful. Awesome. All right. With that said, we are ready to conclude this broadcast. So with everybody here, I just want to remind you, if you've enjoyed this broadcast, you can connect further with our team chat. The link's down below in the YouTube info. Of course, you can support on Patreon, help us reach our goals there by becoming a leading member and joining our private aspect of our community, and even joining on air for future broadcasts and getting discounts and items and everything like that. And yeah, please feel free to just tell your friends about what we got going on here. Subscribe to my TikTok for more content. And yeah, thank you so much for just being a part of the story. So for everybody here, let's just gently unmute ourselves and send some loving alien noises to all the people tuned in. So for all the people who are tuned in, thank you so much. Make that noise. We love you guys. Thanks for being so weird and beautiful. All right. Much love, everyone. As always, keep it shifty, peace and wholeness, and we will see you in the future. Much love. Special thank you to Danny Leonardo, whose music is featured at the beginning and end of this podcast. Be sure to check out more of Danny's work in the YouTube info below. Thank you, Danny.